The Max Kohler report is tip of the iceberg. Where our council have let people down who voted them into power is they have not got best value for a fact, and they have put their friendships beyond that of the people that voted them into power.
It's pretty damning that this corruption wasn't just Joe Anderson. It seemed to be endemic within the council itself.
Where Keir Starmer's made a massive error of judgment, he should have suspended anyone that touched Joe's table. This time, for whatever reason, I think this is going to be the biggest case of fraud and corruption ever found in the UK. Can I prove it legally? No, but I'm not a detective. Do I think they're corrupt? Yes. Do I think that inclusion with the darkened world of gangsters and fraud and corruption? Of course I do. Liverpool is the centre of drugs for Europe. Yeah, possibly put my life at risk. Well, I know it put my life at risk because I had police outside here for 24/7 for 6 weeks for threats on both mine and my wife's life.
Lawrence Kenwright, Liverpool's Donald Trump. Welcome to Eyes Wide Open. Thanks so much for agreeing to come on the show. And here we are in the Shankly Hotel, working operative hotel in Liverpool. And you've come on to tell me about what's going on in Liverpool, with the hotel business in Liverpool, maybe some of the corruption and fraud that's happening behind the scenes in the council and beyond. Lawrence Kenwright, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So how's it going? Tell me what it's like running the Shankly right now, because I know that you've had quite a difficult period with COVID and it closed down a lot of your operation, and you've come through it, and here we are now. You're back in the Shankly. Tell us how it's gone for you and what's happening now.
It would probably be remiss of me not to mention Brexit first, because Brexit was the biggest issue, even though whether you politically wanted to leave or remain. What basically happened when government went against Parliament with that 400-200 vote in August, and then the election ensued thereafter, it basically said to the rest of the world, we don't know what we're doing, and people didn't want to park their cash in the UK, and the UK has an awful lot of cash from China, now Russia, maybe not for long. That gets parked here, so an awful lot of my investment came from those shores, and that just stopped overnight. And then
Brexit slowed down the investment into Liverpool and the hotel business
enormously.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Enormously, like beyond what you could ever imagine. And then the money was going to come after the election. Boris obviously won, December 12th to 13th. And then everyone goes on holiday, coming up to Christmas, all the solicitors go away. We just put in to sell Shankly and James Street for a sale agreed of 48 million for the two. It was all going through Savills, the estate agents, and it was all okay. The deal was back on in January, but then when January came, so did COVID not long after.
Double whammy.
And then we got, it's like coming off the canvas. You've just been knocked to the ground, and then you get up again. You get it with an overhand right, and you fall down again.
Yeah.
That was really, really difficult. And then we had to close. I thought we were closing for 3 weeks. At the time, we met up with a extremely large fund, probably one of the biggest privately held equity funds in Europe. They gave us a very good deal for us to amalgamate with them. We would be 50-50 partners, huge amounts of money. And when I went to see him for the 5th time, he said, it's off. I said, yeah, it'll be close to 3 weeks. He said, it's 2 years.
So they told you it was 2 years up front.
And he's an Etonian.
An Etonian or Evertonian?
There's
I don't know which one to trust.
There's not many Evertonians in London, I don't think, where the money is. But he was an Etonian. He clearly knew the ministers. He clearly knew Boris. He's an 8 billion guy. He's up there. And he said, no, it's a 2-year gig.
Yeah, and it came to pass. His prediction came to pass.
Spot on.
Yeah. So now the COVID phase is over. Are you finding that business is returning to Liverpool? Because I've got my own kind of story with that. I was in service departments. You were the model for it.
Was I the inspiration?
You were the inspiration, yeah. You were
Soon to default inspiration.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I was trying to get some inside info from you. But during COVID, I mean, I pretty much lost most of my stock, and I moved off into a different business, and it was a heavy period, and a business I took, 5 years to build. It was over in a week. It was like collapsed quicker than the Twin Towers. So it must have been a lot worse for you. Your stock and your portfolio was much bigger than mine. And how did you handle having to let go of that stock, that portfolio, or a lot of it? Was it a tough time for you on a personal level?
I think that's an understatement. That
Yeah.
I think I've gone through some tough times during business, and that's what entrepreneurs do. They ride the storm, but that was a storm like no other. That was no option, no chance.
Hospitality was hit hardest than most other business sectors, wasn't it?
Biggest dip recession ever. In the worst hit sector, in the worst hit sector ever. And the people that knew that this was a 2-year gig. Obviously, that information came to me, but I didn't really believe it. Didn't think it was going to be 2 years, because how could anyone survive in 2 years? The problem what all hotels have is every single hotel now has lost an awful lot of businessmen now. So they've lost at least 25% of their business users. Now, for most hotels, that's their midweek user gone down to a level of making a loss. You couple that with that's your backbone. You couple that with the fact that your hotel will say maybe worth £10 million before. You've dropped 25% of your valuation pretty much overnight. Hotels work on a model of 70% loan to value. So if you had a hotel value at 10 million, you'd have 70% loan to value, so £7 million borrowings with your bank. Most hotels have mezz level on top, which is another 15%. So you have a £10 million valuation, you've got £8.5 million borrowings against it. But the hotel sector's just dropped by 25%.
So you can't pay your bills?
So no worse than that. You're £1 million under, which means you're insolvent.
Yeah.
On top of that, you've got a Sybil's loan, which you've used.
Yeah.
On top of that, you've got losses that you've just incurred for the last 2 years. So you've got a massive hole in your P&L, and your bricks and mortar is now £1 million under.
And the banks aren't really going to give you leeway, are they? It's fuck you, pay me.
Oh no, so it's a little bit different than that. It's a fun to fail thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is, where the predator comes in and devours. And
it's like they're sitting on the banks of the savannah, isn't it, waiting for this opportunity. Have you ever seen that picture of the vulture, of the dying kid, and it's waiting, it's just sitting there waiting? I felt like this was a prime moment for banks to do what they do.
So it's that case of win-win, isn't it?
Yeah.
A bank wins by putting whatever it is, 4, 5, 6% on top of their loan. Some of them a lot more than that now. New hotels can't even get credit card facilities now, because there's so much underwater. The sector is finished. It's like retail. Hotel groups now are trying to ensure that they bring in new funding very quickly, but the discount they have to give to the valuation in order to gain that new funding is like beyond what I've ever seen before. The sector at this moment in time, if banks, which they won't because they've done this in 2007-08, they revalued the sector. All sectors got revalued at that time.
Downvalued.
And always when there's negativity, valuers will always downvalue because they need to look after their insurance.
Yeah.
They haven't asked that to happen this time. This time, it's about pressure from every single angle you can think of. You've got rates to pay, you've got a big black hole there, you've got your ROI, your return on investment to your investors or to your fund. You have debts in there, Sybil loans in there, a decreased valuation. You have a huge hole that if you're allowed to be optimistic. As a director, you're allowed to be optimistic. But there comes a point where HMRC will be able to turn around and say, you were too far gone there. You carried on, you incurred more losses.
Fuck you, pay me.
We're going to make sure that the guidance or the perimeter that is around you as a director of a company, that limited liability then is taken away, and therefore we're going to jump over the garden fence and we're going to come after you personally. So that's what you've got to start taking on board.
They punch through the corporate veil to go after you on a personal level. Not you personally, but I mean, that's what their tactics are. If
they can prove that you were at a loss, and you can state, I'm being optimistic as a businessman, but there will become a point where that's beyond optimism.
Yeah.
And then HMRC is beyond governance of police in some ways, because
they've got more powers, haven't they?
You've got to make sure that you prove that you are innocent.
So to the way around, you're guilty until proven innocent.
so they will estimate.
Yeah.
And then let's just say you're in a fit of depression.
Yeah.
Your life's work's gone down the drain. You've got, the assets that you've got are not worth any money anymore. You've got no cash. You can't pay nothing back. You're under severe pressure. And then the letters start coming in from HMRC. Well, it's fair to say, isn't it, that you might open those letters. And maybe you're a bit scared of opening them up. So a month goes to 2 months, and then they start evaluating what your debt is. When they start evaluating what your debt is and you don't answer that, then it becomes set in stone. It gets passed on to another department. When it goes to another department, they don't know why that evaluation was made or how it was made or what reasoning was behind it. They don't care. It goes to another department, they just chase. And when they chase, they chase. And all of a sudden, you as a businessman, you've gone from having a nice little business, nice little hotel, nice income, nice life.
The wolves are at the door.
To an absolute nightmare.
So it didn't just hit you on a personal level. Is that Liverpool had reinvented itself largely over the past 20 years as a tourist destination, as a place for people to come from all over the country and come to Liverpool for a good time. It's a small, compact city. You can party all night here and you can have a great time here. And, part of what you were offering was to be able to give people a good time, an experience in Liverpool, and that tourism, which helped to rebuild the city. Yep. It got smashed. It got absolutely hammered during those 2 years, and it was like, well, what else are we going to do here without the tourism? Have you found that now we've weathered the storm, and that level of tourism is starting to come back to the city? Do you think it's going to come back to the levels it was before COVID hit?
So I would say it's 15 years. So since Liverpool 1 was first opened 2008. So in 2008, I think that was the rebirth.
Yeah. Capital culture was 2008 in Liverpool, wasn't it? Yeah.
But Liverpool 1, I mean, capital culture, to the more sophisticated probably sort of clientele that would come to the city. But
that was like a signal, wasn't it? It was a signal to international investors. It's time to put some money into Liverpool. We're all looking at it.
Yeah. But the original sort of splurge, if you like, into that sector was based upon Liverpool 1 coming. When Liverpool 1 coming, a tidal wave of new guests to the city that probably would never have come, then sort of, shall we go to Liverpool? Because Liverpool before that time was still that calm down, fake wig, fake moustache. Am I going to lose the wheels on my
so
car?
The legacy of the 80s was still hanging on, wasn't it? And
very much so.
2008 was the renaissance of the city.
The rebirth, yeah. So that 2008, I think, was the start of sort of us being a tourist destination. And we were probably about 8th or 9th, when I'm 5th. And I would say, if you'd have told me that 15 years ago that we would be number 5 tourist destination in the UK, I'd have laughed. I'd have said not a chance.
Someone needs to take credit for that, don't they, as well? Because if it was at a council level, we'll get to the council in a bit. I mean, who was it Mike Story? Was he instrumental in turning Liverpool into a tourist destination, or was it just think it was just a collective move by the people in the city ready to reinvent themselves?
I don't even think back in those dark days, I don't think that any politician had that type of insight at all.
So everyone was just hustling and trying to find
a way through, if I can just go back to that 2008, that's when I opened as well.
That's what I was going to say. So what were you doing in 2008?
So I'd just gone broke with a cluster of apartments that I ended up buying back.
So did you reinvent yourself as well during this period? Yeah, because I know you had different businesses, didn't you, before this period? You were in retail.
Yeah, I was in retail before, hated it.
Yeah.
I used to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, drive down to London in a van with a sack full of money, buy a load of what we call cabbage, put it in the back of the van, get back to Liverpool probably at 12 at night, offload the van, put it into the shops.
You're speaking in code here.
Sorry.
Go on.
Put it into the stores, for me to deliver it the next day, but I'm going to bed. And then end up delivering it and then go to bed 36 hours later. So that would be my life for 20 years.
20 years, okay.
Yeah, so I
had a good run.
Had a great run, and it was really good, and Primark come along, and the price differential from what I was selling my stock for to what Primark was selling, we were still cheaper than Primark, but my prices were...
so did they globalise, discount clothing and made it cool, if you like?
They made it cool, but they also they also brought it down 10 notches.
Did they squash a lot of the competition?
They squashed everyone.
Yeah.
So where I'd be like £4 for whatever it was, trousers or whatever it may be, and say Mark Spencer might be in £16, say, they would be 6 and I'd be 4. So the point of difference wasn't good enough, I don't think, for me to survive. Anyway, it wasn't about me surviving, really. It was more about me disliking that job and doing it for 20 years. And I think I built up to 30 odd shops, and I had 450 staff. I had a factory in Sri Lanka. I had a factory in Manchester, a factory in Liverpool.
Cool.
I had that when I was 26. So I was a born entrepreneur. I was a guy that ran into business without fear.
Yeah.
Which actually is quite fearful.
Yeah, because it can go wrong at any moment, can't it?
And you only learn that when you get older, or when you go through a pandemic.
I mean, that's part of the excitement of being an entrepreneur, though, isn't it? Is that you're prepared to take on the risk that most people wouldn't even consider in a day. So you have the highs and you have the lows, and that's all part of the journey, part of the fun.
I'd also say be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the point being that I then made quite a bit of money out of the retail, put it into property, and then lost a lot. I then bought it back. When I bought it back, I decided to put 14 beds into one, and it was 16 beds into one duplex apartment. And I realised group accommodation was the way forward.
Okay, so let me just interrupt you there, because that's, I think, is an important point, because I think one of the things that you are most well known for is your pioneering energy within this sector of being able to attract groups to Liverpool and offer group rooms and groups.
Is that your view based on your knowledge?
That's my view, that you're the pioneer of that concept, as far as I understand it. Right? You can tell me otherwise in a second, but so tell me about how you came up with the idea of putting 16 beds in an apartment. Why did you think there was a market there for a 16-bed room?
So just to come back maybe 6 months before that, I went to bed for 3 months when I lost everything.
Yeah.
I couldn't turn on a computer beforehand because I always had staff to do those sort of tasks.
So you were depressed for 3 months?
Oh, gone. Yeah, gone. Nowhere near as depressed as what I've just been.
So you've had experience.
This was a whole new level of depression. Yeah. This was really bad. Yeah. Because then I wasn't known. Now I am known.
Yeah.
You know, I might be known around the UK, but I'm known certainly in Liverpool. So, I realised that social media was going to be the thing.
Yeah.
And I knew that groups were going to get bigger. And so when I had the opportunity to put beds, I put more beds in than what would be normal. But then I would cloud that like bed issue, if you like, with an extreme design. So I also knew that when someone went into a bedroom in a hotel, they tend to throw the bags and move on. So let's use travel as the extreme of that sort of offer. A very vanilla, very normal, very standardised offer. You throw your bags and you make a run for it. You go around the city. I thought that there was an opportunity to make a bigger room, put more beds in, but make the room the experience, not so much the hotel reception. So every room had to have what I would call 3 sharp edges.
Okay.
And those sharp edges led to a boastful play. A boastful play would be you picking up your phone, taking a picture with the backdrop, doing whatever you do to the picture.
Instagrammable rooms.
Stick it out right away. I'm giving you no longer a bed. I'm giving you your boastful play on Instagram.
So you were selling, rather than putting heads on beds, you were putting plenty of heads on beds. Yeah. You were selling an experience, a guest experience, which I think that's one of the things you were a pioneer of in Liverpool.
That's what I pioneered. Yeah. I didn't pioneer group because you had plenty of groups.
Yeah.
There was plenty of people doing groups at the time, whether it be hostels or whatever. So that was out there.
But it was a different type of groups, wasn't it? This was like glamorous. This was like, a gang of girls, really, a gang of lads coming to Liverpool to enjoy a stag party or a hen party, and you being able to offer them one space for them all to be in and enjoy their experience in Liverpool, which I thought was quite a unique.
So let me evolve on that. So very clear early on, I realised that Newcastle was the stag central, and Liverpool wasn't anything. So
that was one of the inspirations, was it?
So I believe I created Liverpool to be a hen party centre.
Yeah.
So all of my rooms are quite effeminate. they're all quite pink or flowery or whatever it may be.
You designed them as well.
And I designed every one of them, you know. Apart from a few bedrooms were designed by one of my friend's daughters who came in to help me, and she was very, very good. They're the only ones, a few of them in here that have been done that way.
Maybe Liverpool's Lawrence Llewellyn Bowen rather than Donald Trump there, yeah.
Yeah, well, who knows. So anyway, going back to the point being that I didn't create the group accommodation concept, but I did create the experience bedroom, because 99.9% of all bedrooms are all vanilla. Yeah. There's no thought or there's nothing.
Yours were all individual and each one was different, wasn't it?
Well, that's based on that Hilton model of wherever you go in the world. I'm going back 20 years. Yeah. Wherever you go in the world, and we only had yellow pages then. Wherever you go in the world, you know you've walked into a Hilton. Yeah. I think that's detrimental to those brands now, because I don't think that normality is what people want anymore, because no one's going to ever boast about normality. And if you're not going to boast about the place you stay, you're probably not going to book it. So you have an option where you've got a boastful play within that bedroom, rather than a vanilla bedroom where you've got no boastful play. Yeah. You're getting that for free. So you can stay in your room 50% longer in our bedrooms than what you would do in a normal one. That's
where the party is, isn't it, to a large degree? Is in the room with the girls, getting ready to go out, coming back, all that kind of thing.
So say you've got, on average, our rooms have got 10 bed spaces in each one. We know our guests stay in that bedroom 50% longer than a normal standardised bedroom. We also know that they'll take 5 pictures on average. So you've got 10 people times 5 pictures times on average 500 people. It's 25,000 people a night, every night, getting hit by every single bedroom seamlessly, without prompt, without me stating, oh, will you take a picture?
So your customers become your marketers, in a sense.
Peer-to-peer marketing.
They're ecstatic fans, aren't they? And they're, sharing images of your building, your experience on their social media.
So if you go back to 25 years ago, and you were going to advertise, I don't know, Lauren Perry or whatever it may be, and you put it on ITV, say, you probably get 25% of all the punters that are watching the TV at that time. Now, because TV is so fragmented, there's millions of options now for channels. So the advertising dollar is no longer based on TV. It's not based on radio, and it's certainly not based in newspaper.
Social media.
It's social media. So social media took that over. So when you when you gain interaction seamlessly from a peer-to-peer play, that is the amber nectar to everything. That is key, because we've all seen how influencers have fell off their pedestal in the last couple of years, whereas 5 years ago, influencers were really important to social media in selling product. Now it's, I know you don't use that. Whereas John, who comes to our hotel and stays and takes his pictures in our hotel, there's no axe to grind with John. John is just sharing his experience in a very normal manner. And that normal experience, or that normal process of sharing that experience, actually is the secret ingredient to us filling our hotels, because every single time we have, let's say, an event on, I know there's thousands of pictures going out, getting shared thousands of times without us doing a damn thing. But we gain the benefit of that.
It's viral, isn't it, without you having to spend any
money
doing
anything. And that's why we came number 5 out of 33,000 hotels as the most Instagrammable hotel. And the only hotels that beat us were the Ritz, Savoy, Lanesborough and the Ned. They're all £1 billion hotels, by the way. They're all in London. We're the only one outside of London. We were the top out of all those. So that was a huge win for us, because
so when did you know,
that's how we fill our rooms.
So when did you know, right, that this innovation that you brought to Liverpool, and I believe that you did, right? Yeah. When did you know that you struck the jackpot with this idea? Because, it's not only you doing it now. You spawned a load of copycats. I was one of them, right? You spawned a load of copycats, and everyone was getting a piece of the pie, because there was so much business coming into Liverpool. You couldn't provide enough rooms for all of them, so there was enough to go around for a lot of other people, and it helped build the local economy, and times were good, and everyone was having a good time. I mean, when did you realise that you'd struck the jackpot and that you could repeat this concept? Because there was a period where you were on, full conquest, wasn't it? You were opening hotels left, right and centre in Cardiff, in Belfast and other places, and you're pretty much using this model that you had pioneered. Well, tell me about when you knew you'd struck gold. Gold is the wrong way, but when you knew it was a winner.
So the apartments that we bought back when I lost everything, and we bought every single one back, there was one apartment there that had, like, say 16 beds in it. And Kate was in control of filling the rooms. I was creating the noise. So I was creating videos, and I was creating, I was doing content writing. So I was chasing search term. You know what I mean by that, don't you? Mm-hmm. Do you think your punters know what I mean by that? Yeah. So I was chasing search terms. So it was a search term.
You might want to explain it though.
So let's say Google back in the day, it was really important to identify what your key search terms, what your punters would probably search for.
And what would they search? Give us an example.
Let's say party apartments.
In Liverpool?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would then create lots of content on party apartments. So I would create a 3,000 word document, blog if you like, on party apartments. I would then create a party apartment video on YouTube. I would also SEO, search engine optimization, the video and also the blog. I would embed the video onto the blog, and then when the Google spiders went over it, they would know that that was specific to that search term, unlike websites would be on multiple search terms. I know it's complicated, but that's what I done to ensure that we dominated search.
Yeah. So you owned certain search terms like
specific to me
in Liverpool, or group accommodation
all those
in
words,
Liverpool.
All those words. Yeah. So I understood that very early on.
Yeah.
So because I was an online guy, albeit self-taught, I then understood about backdrops. I then understood about pictures. I then understood about what is known as wabi-sabi, slight imperfections. What are those things that you...
It's a Japanese one where you smash it, put it back together, and...
What are the slight imperfections? What are those things that you go, I've won.
Yeah.
When I get that, I've won. Yeah. When someone walks into a bedroom and goes, oh, God, I should make this, I've won. When someone wants to recount going to Liverpool 10 years on and speaks about their experience of going into a bedroom that had a secret bathroom, that had a pig's head coming out of the wall, or angel wings coming off the wall and flowers, whatever.
Experience.
I own space in your mind then for 10 years, as opposed to a travel that you can never remember.
Yeah.
You will never remember. So I understood that space very, very, very early on. And then I just gained in confidence of being more extreme. So before I knew it, I was building Roman baths down the middle of bedrooms with 12 bedrooms off.
Wasn't there one in James Street with that big, huge, like mini swimming pool inside the room, was it?
You will bring up the one I
lost. We'll get to that one in a minute.
Baby. So that one was really important because obviously home of the Titanic. It was the...
Well, we'll come to that in a minute.
Okay.
St. James Street. Sorry, I was just talking about the idea that you were taking rooms to extremes, right, in terms of like the individualness. And there was one, I think, in St. James Street that was like a huge jacuzzi in there, was it? Like
it was a swimming pool, and
it was in the room.
No.
Oh, right.
No.
Okay,
so I'll quickly explain what that was. It was a room with I think it was 24 bed spaces. At 7 o'clock. The concierge would come in with a gold key on a gold cushion and say, theatrically, ladies and gentlemen, your room awaits you. He would walk over to the walk-in safe, like the original one, and put the key in the door and turn the handles and open this massive 2-ton door. And embedded in the floor was a circular hole with a steel spiral staircase cascading to the floor below. So before you know it, you got all these stilettos going down, this spiral staircase going down, and then they would go into the spa area. So the spa area would be part of your room. Yeah. These sort of things have never been done before.
Yeah, it was unique, wasn't it? It was
totally unique. Yeah,
and that led to your massive success. That period, it was like you were on fire. Everything you touched turned to gold, and you expanded really quickly in Liverpool. Your face was everywhere. You were Mr. Liverpool for one point. During the height of that, expansion.
14-year period, that, by the way. So it wasn't as quick as what you think.
Okay, right. Yeah. So 14-year period, and you had a number of amazing hotels in Liverpool, but we'll focus on St. James Hotel.
30 James Street.
30 James Street, which was an iconic, or is an iconic building in Liverpool, right on the pier head. Amazing architecture that laid empty for decades. And you came in, and this became something of a signature thing for you, wasn't it? It was finding old, derelict buildings in Liverpool that had been left to rack and ruin, and you came in and you did your thing on it. Tell us about James Street as a project.
James Street was forlorn for 20 years, and the last user was a drug rehab centre. It didn't make economic sense. That's why these buildings lay there forlorn, because no one truly understands what the cost would be. And normally, developers are normally ivory tower developers. Nearly all developers don't do what I do.
No, they knock it down and rebuild, don't they?
No, well, you can't. So you can't with a listed building. You can't do that.
All right, okay.
So, but what I mean by that is they'll bring in another builder, if you like, and then the builder will have to quote for any eventuality and a margin. So, and then he would subcontract out again, and they would do the same within their sector, any eventuality and a margin. So £1 ends up becoming 3, unless you do it yourself. Now, you know, there's plenty of bloody noses doing these things on your, by yourself, because you have to take on all the issues of a building, asbestos and whatever it may be. But that should have been £10 million to refurb, and it only had a £10 million valuation. We done it for £6 million, and we ended up with a £13.7 million valuation. And we turned it into the most occupied, so from dereliction to the most occupied hotel in the city, bar none. It was 96% full.
And was that a group model as well?
It was probably it was the start of a flamboyant hotel, not so developed on groups, but more developed on backdrops, as in, you know, that's the wall, take your picture, go and take your picture in that wall, go and do it in 10 different places, and go and share it online.
It's got a connection to the Titanic, you were going to say before, isn't it, that building?
It is the only building in the world,
Yeah.
the only building in the world, and we don't rejoice in it enough, that actually can be called the home of the Titanic, because it's where the vessel was registered to.
Wow.
JP Morgan once owned it.
Amazing.
When he bought the White Star Line. And there's an amazing story about the rivalry between White Star, Titanic, and the Cunard, and the two chairmen, and how they cascaded together, even though they were shooting buddies of a weekend, but worst of enemies in work. And there's lots of stories like that with like Microsoft and Apple and Puma and Adidas, you know, where these two businesses are so involved in their rivalry. They sharpen the tools so sharp that when they cascade to the highest highs, which these companies did, they look around them and say, where's the competition? Because the rivalry's so fierce. And that was one of those rivalries. In 1934, the Cunard ended up taking over White Star Line. JP Morgan had died. JP Morgan, just so you know, created the Federal Bank.
Yeah.
So he created the dollar.
Yeah,
he's
the
the guy who
Federal
created
Reserve,
yeah, he's the guy for that. Yeah. So, you know, really important guy.
Dodgy, though. Have a little look at JP Morgan. He's dodgy, man.
Well, you know when he died, you know how much of his own business he owned?
None.
He owned 20%.
Right.
The Rothschilds owned the other 80%.
Yeah. No,
Anyway,
well,
we digress.
That's a tangent for another day, that one, isn't it?
So, anyway, rabbit hole, that one.
Quick!
More like a volcano, that one, isn't it?
Wheel back, quick!
So, Cunard took over White Star Line. And what's really strange is in 1934, as those two businesses collided and obviously amalgamated because of airplane was now the main mode of transport for delivering letters and whatever. And you can see the demise of these two companies, but you also see the demise of Liverpool.
That's interesting, isn't it? How technology, you know, totally transformed what appeared to be a rock solid business model with the Cunard and the White Star. You know, they couldn't have been doing any better, and all of a sudden with aviation brought it to an end. And Liverpool had one of its downturns as a result, because it's had quite a few ups and downs, Liverpool, hasn't it, in its time?
I don't think it's ever got back to the 1934 heights. You know, because we were number 2 city then.
And it was the gateway of the empire, wasn't it?
So we've certainly had it far tougher than probably what our ancestors would have thought. I think, you know, with the demise of the Hatton era, what went on there, that was...
Well, the 60s began it, really, the docks, when the docks ended as the main source of income for Liverpool, and the decline began to happen then, you know, from the 60s up to the 80s, when that was the, you know, the final nail in the coffin.
I personally don't think the 60s was the demise, because my dad was a docker. It was containerisation that killed it off, but that was a bit later on than the 60s. I was born in 65. My dad was a docker right the way through to the 80s. And I think when containerisation come and it all went off to Felixstowe, that was the end of the 20,000 dockers that worked there at the time.
But do you reckon, you know, one of the reasons that happened was the EU? The EU moved, you know, the containerisation to other parts of the EU.
There were other complications. Don't forget, we silted up in the Mersey, and it went. Southampton.
But there's talk that Liverpool's docks could be reborn if under a Brexit Britain, whatever that is. I don't even know what that means anymore. But that one of the reasons was the EU just moved it.
Well, I think it is fair to say, and I'm not in any way shouting off for Trump here, but if Trump would have stayed in power, that America, UK treaty absolutely would have been like America's 26% of the total
Brexit
spend.
almost feels like a distant memory, doesn't it? It's like we've come so far over such a short period of time because Brexit happened and then COVID hit. What was Brexit?
no, Brexit was absolutely enormous, and we lost £80 billion worth of turnover in a year, just over that. We went from the fifth biggest economy to the sixth. France took our fifth place because of that. By the way, I think it now is the best thing we'll ever do, and I do think the America-UK trade, America being 26%, European 16%. Obviously, we're better spent taking our time with the Americans rather than Europe. I know we're close to Europe, but that to me would be the better play for us. And when I say us, I mean Liverpool.
Yeah.
I don't really care about the rest of the UK. I only care about Liverpool. Now, Liverpool would be the best play for us. So when Donald Trump was voted out, Biden took over. Biden and Obama never liked the UK. They never wanted
the EU. That's what they want to deal with, one unit entity, don't they?
They want one world economy.
Yeah.
And obviously people like Trump, they're populists. And in some ways, I'm a populist because I believe in Liverpool having its own economy. I believe in Liverpool looking after its own. I think in Liverpool creating its own funds, its own profitability. And I think that is something that is cascaded by having a mayor, but then we have our problems with our mayors, and ultimate power corrupts absolutely, and you got all those arguments as well. So it's very complex. But I think overall, taking away all the anomalies, what's happened over the last couple of years, I do think Liverpool is best served with a mayor, and I do think we have to find someone who is good enough, strong enough, and knowledgeable enough, and it shouldn't be a politician.
Okay, we'll get to the juicy bit about the mayor in a bit, right? Let's just finish up on your kind of path to where we are now, because it's relevant, I think, to establish those facts and that part of the story. So when we move into what actually happened with the council, because it's really interesting, and I think it's important for us to understand the steps that got you there. So you had this amazing success. The Signature Living brand was all kinds of different spokes to its, core concept, and then you took an interest in politics. Not specifically, but in terms of local politics, how it affects local people, and you became concerned with the situation that you were observing in the city, and you believed that it could be done better, and you weren't shy about vocalizing your opinions on that, which I thought was really quite ballsy at the time, because you were having a go, you were having a pop, and you were criticising the people that needed to be criticised, because the media sure as hell weren't doing it. And I think that's why the Donald Trump tag works, because not only are you a property developer, but you've got a hotel, you live in your own hotel, and you're teetotal. So I think the comparisons are there, and you're a populist, like you've just said. So you move into a different phase of your operation, and I believe it kind of came from the work that you did with the homeless, because that was something that was unexpected, really, I think, because this became something of a cause celebrate for you. It was something you're really passionate about, and you took on this challenge that the council certainly weren't doing properly, of trying to find a solution to the growing homeless issue that we were facing in Liverpool, because that's relatively new, isn't it? This level of homelessness on the streets. I mean, we didn't see so much of it, in the 80s. I can't really remember much about that. It seems to be more like a modern problem. And no one seems to have the answer to it. It just keeps growing and getting worse. Tell me about how you found yourself involved in this, quite controversial area of, what's going on in society.
So I'm an entrepreneurial socialist. It's what I believe in. So I believe in being entrepreneurial, but I also believe in naturally giving back without doing social platform posts. I don't believe that's the right thing to do. So I come from a very, very poor background. I come from a place called Walton. My dad was a docker. He lost a leg. We lived on invalidity benefits. So we had it really tough growing up.
And for people who don't know, Liverpool's a very left-wing city, isn't it? Liverpool is a socialist city because it is deprived, and it's probably one of the most deprived areas.
Especially then.
Especially then, yeah. I mean, even now, though, the 2008 redevelopment of Liverpool was pretty much the city centre. It didn't deal with the north of Liverpool.
No.
It's still, half derelict and falling down. It's a disgrace, really, that the council haven't done anything about it. So Walton is one of those really deprived areas of Liverpool.
But I think that time in my life, being a 15-year-old guy, having to leave school without qualifications because we couldn't afford to live properly, knowing that my dad had one leg and we lived on invalidity benefits, and my mum was a court worker. So credentials as a Labour guy, and I'm still a Labour member today, court worker for a mum and a docker as a dad doesn't get any better or worse than however you want to put it. So my first job was shoveling fuller's earth, which was manure. I had to do that 8 ton a day, and I realised very early on that wasn't what I wanted to do. And then obviously I've been entrepreneurial, and by a very young age I've got a load of retail stores and staff and factories, and then before I know it I've got properties, and then I'm a hotelier. God knows how I got here, but I ended up being a hotelier. And I think I forgot myself along the way.
Okay.
So
that's interesting. What made you think that? Because of the success and the attention and the glory and all those things?
Started believing in my own bullshit.
Yeah.
I'm like you said before. Everything turns to gold, and I'm amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm not.
Yeah.
So
it sounds like those stumbles that you've had along the way have been real good learning curves for you. Learning about yourself.
The learning curve I got from the homeless shelter that I created was extremely emotional to me.
Yeah.
And hit me like a ton of bricks. I didn't believe for a minute that this sort of shit went on. I knew, obviously politically, I knew what sort of monies were getting spent. I knew our council spent 11.7 million a year.
What, on the homeless issue?
On the homeless issue.
11.7 million.
11.7 million. I also knew that 100 of our people went to rehab a year at 12 grand a pop.
100 of the people from Liverpool get sent to rehab?
100, funded by the council, and pretty much none of them are successful. And is that because, "Hi John, how are you? Good to see you back." And so I didn't understand any of this.
There's no incentive really to get them off.
They're delighted, aren't they? So I didn't really understand the process, and I'm embarrassed to say that I didn't understand about homelessness and the plight and their issues and austerity, because I lived in a hotel.
Yeah.
Why would I know? Okay. So one day I got a call, and I'm reasonably handy, so I go downstairs and I handle most things myself. So I go downstairs, and there's
downstairs here, in the Shankly.
I've got 3 floors of car park that sit underneath here.
So it's just here, isn't it? There's a car park there. So that's the location that started it.
So there were a few guys, because nine out of every 10 is male, and 9 out of every 10 is drugs. Maybe 8 out of 10, the other 2 being alcoholics. And they'd run around the car park where I have kids, and my kids go, and needles hanging out their arms and all that sort of stuff. So aggressively, I'm dragging them out of the car park. And as I'm taking up the last ramp going out into the cold air, it must have been -5. It was bitter. And I'm looking at these guys, and it's ingrained dirt, it's no teeth, it's the full thing. And in my ears, ringing is Joe's bullshit. No second night.
So Joe Anderson we're talking about here. It was the mayor at the time,
and a friend.
Okay, we'll get to that in a second. But he's the longest serving mayor in Liverpool. Well, the only mayor.
Longest serving leader,
politician or
outside of Nottingham.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So very controversial figure in the city. We'll get to him in a minute. But
now wasn't then.
But at that time, you had a friendly relationship with Joe Anderson.
Very close.
Yeah, and. So you dealt with this homeless situation in your car park under the Shankly, and that caused you to front Joe about this issue and say, what's going on?
No, it's not. That's not really what happened. I saw Joe as an entrepreneurial socialist, so I seamlessly cascaded towards him. I believed in what he was saying. I believed in his mantra is understanding of how the system should work. It didn't work that way, but how it should work. And I believed in him delivering that for the city. So when he said to me, there's only 15, actually no, first he said to me, there's only 20 homeless in the city. And then I went to a council meeting one day just to understand, because I'm starting to learn about politics. And they all stood up, all the councillors, there's 90 councillors in Liverpool, the 90 councillors all stood up and give themselves a round of applause because the number had fell down from 20 to 15. But the day before, I just opened my shelter. Now, my shelter was because of the people downstairs, and I realised how cold it was.
Where was the shelter? Was it a specific building that you had?
Yeah, it was called Kingsway House, which is about 100 yards from here. So when I realised that these people were real, that, yes, you know, they may be professional beggars, but they have a professional habit. So it is to feed that habit. And when I realised how severe it was, within 2 hours we opened up Kingsway House. Now, when I say we opened it up, we just turned the heaters on and opened up one of the offices that we had, that we were developing out. It's now finished now, the development, pretty much. But at the time, it was still going in for planning, so I had plenty of time with it, and I opened it up.
What was the purpose of it? What was you trying to achieve, or what was it a service was offering to those people who were vulnerable and desperate?
I was offering basic humanity.
Yeah.
Warmth, shelter, food.
Somewhere to sleep?
Yeah. So I phoned Joe pretty much right away. Well, actually the next day. There were 18 people who turned up on the first day, 35 the next, 50 the next, and then 85 on the fourth day.
So it blew his 20 out of the water.
Well, do you know how they evaluate? And these are the things you learn along the way. How they evaluate who's homeless. They go round at 12 o'clock, when as far as I know, that is peak hour for begging. And if you're lying on your back, you are homeless. You're not going to be lying on your back because you're begging. You're going to be sitting upright. If you're sitting upright, you are not homeless. That's how they evaluate it. So I'm in the middle of, you know, taking in more and more every day, in the middle of the council standing up with a standing ovation because now there's only 15 homeless and I had 85 within 2 days after. So I phoned Joe up naively, not realising that Joe had just opened his own homeless shelter the day before called the Library House.
So did you know this?
No.
Or did Joe see this as an affront for you doing one at the same time?
I'm going to come back to this in a minute.
Okay.
But at the same time, I'm just going to segue off.
Go on, yeah.
I'm not going to segue off, but I'm just going to say, just put one in there.
Yeah.
At the same time, I'm talking to him about possibly running for mayor myself.
Okay, so that seems like a big jump. Was this something that your interest in becoming a local politician, becoming mayor of Liverpool, was this piqued by this whole homeless experience and feeling as if you could do better than what was going on? Where did this idea of being a politician come from?
Do you want to go there now?
Well, I think it might be important because I think that's what you're saying is that this is key, you see, I think, in your story, because what comes as a result of this, the persecution and harassment that you face later on, is to do with this period of time. So I think it's important that we lay the facts down for that part of the story.
So, Joe's way forward with the political and business elite was they came first. And if you visualise a triangle, they'd be at the pinnacle of that triangle. And the base never got looked at. My view was always to turn the triangle upside down. And to me, the most important people were the most vulnerable. And I believe if society looks after the most vulnerable, that's how you will be deemed. So Joe never looked at the most vulnerable. He said he did. I know he didn't. And I'm starting to realise now, as I'm looking to the most vulnerable of all, I now realise that it is just a tick box political exercise.
Yeah. Do you think Joe, though, seen it as a trickle-down concept? He thought, you know, if the business people are investing here, if there's enterprise happening and there's building happening, that it'll trickle down to everybody else? And do you think that was what he was focusing on? Or was it something entirely different?
I mean, there are two angles with this. It is something entirely different. But the trickle down dried up before it got down.
Yeah. Didn't trickle far.
It didn't trickle more than 60%. And the people at the very, very bottom didn't even get a sniff.
You've only got to look at North Liverpool. I mean, it's an embarrassment. No money has been getting put into those areas.
There's There's an argument with all monies that get distributed. That there's a huge issue with how money's spent.
Yeah.
And how services are delivered.
When you decided that you wanted to get involved in local politics and run for mayor, talk to me about that.
Well, I didn't decide, and I still to this day haven't decided that I wanted to do that. I just know I have a lot to offer.
Yeah.
So I know I have a sharpened skill set, and I understand how to create narrative, bring in investment, and create jobs. That's the gig. Anyone who can do that on that trickle-down theory that you've got, that works. But I also have an understanding of how to give the most vulnerable a chance and an option and a way forward. And I learned that skill set in my 4 years of owning and operating and looking after a homeless shelter.
Yeah.
In fact, I had 2.
So that was like your training ground, really, in terms of dealing with local politics and seeing what's happening actually on the ground, on the actual bottom floor. There is no lower rung, is there, than being homeless. That's the absolute rock bottom for anyone in this society. Well, homeless, drug addictions, drink,
believe it
alcoholics.
Believe it or not, there are levels within the homeless.
Yeah, so there's even like a
a
strata within them.
You were cascading to just say, that there's a bubble and that's homeless. And I would say within that there are levels. And what I mean by that is there are homeless people who are really put together, understand what they're doing, aren't addicts, but just fell on hard times. Then there's the addicts, and then there's the aggressive addicts. Now,
the mentally ill as well.
Well, they'll be the aggressive.
Yeah.
So more often than not. So all the ones that I took into Kingsway House weren't your normal homeless, because the normal homeless had already found themselves a place.
Yeah.
So they were fine. So all the ones of reasonable level, reasonable behaviour, had found their place. They were fine. Every single one of mine was fractious. And what I mean by that is, let's just say you are an addict, and let's just say it's something like heroin. So you're on a 3-hour turn. But after 2 hours, you're fractious. So if I'm unlucky enough to catch you within the 3rd hour, then it's quite likely he's going to be aggressive with me. Now, we may be 8 stone. I'm 15 stone 10.
But the wild, aren't they?
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So what happens is when they're going into Labury House or Whitechapel or whatever it may be, and they've been fractious the day before because you caught them in that sinister hour, they have turned on whoever and said, I'll do whatever. They've gone, right, your band. And I go, I get that. But that means you're basically killing that person off, because that person is either going to have the most horrendous of nights trying to get warm in sinister weather, or they're going to die. Now, before we opened Kingsway House, 6 people died in Liverpool of hypothermia. 1 died in December before we opened it, and then none died thereafter. We saved lives in a much colder winter than the year before. So we know what we achieved. The problem was that we were given warmth, food, shelter. We weren't given mental health. So as soon as we opened the shelter, Joe Anderson came down and wasn't very happy.
What's amazing is that you think that the council would celebrate, a public service like that, right? Helping people. You think that they would say,
come on.
I know, it turned out to be a threat to them, or it was perceived as a threat rather than as the public service that it was, and then that became something of a problem for you, didn't it?
At the time, Joe had just been brought in for questioning for Operation Sheridan.
During the same period?
Yeah.
Okay, tell us about Operation Sheridan.
Okay.
It's a big story, right? This whole thing has got so many tentacles, and I think they're all important. That occasionally, I think it's important for us just to give a little bit of background, right, to a specific area for our audience, because they might want to know briefly what Operation Sheridan is, without us going into too much detail, or we'll be here forever.
I don't want to name names because it is on public record, and I can clearly name the names. But I don't really want to, just out of respect, and court cases.
Yeah.
So Operation Sheridan was about a BT contract that started its life out in Lancashire, and then the people that created that contract and the extension of that contract before it reached Lancashire, so there was money put on top before it got there. I believe, I'm not 100% sure on that. That same practice, when those individuals came to Liverpool, brought that same practice with them. So
So the people who were running West Lancashire Council, the bureaucrats, were brought to Liverpool to run Liverpool Council. Yeah.
In essence, yeah.
In essence, and whatever the police were investigating in West Lancashire, potentially they brought that to Liverpool too.
Yes.
And so there was a continuing police investigation called Operation Sheridan into those same people that Joe Anderson was then implicated in.
Yes.
Right.
So Operation Sheridan before Brexit, I believe, was a £4 million investigation over a term of 4 years.
So the police spent £4 million on this investigation.
I now
like a
believe
big investigation. That.
I now believe it's a £6 million investigation.
What's the charges of the investigation? Misconduct of public office.
Again,
That hasn't been declared, has it?
I don't know when it's been declared. I certainly know it.
Yeah.
I don't want to get involved.
Sure.
I don't want to get involved in what I believe is going to be a court case.
Yeah.
I believe that's going to go to fruition, go to court case. Whatever happens.
So it's gone from 4 million to 6 million.
Yeah. At one point when Operation Aloft reared its ugly head.
Okay, so what's Operation Aloft?
So
It seems like there's a lot of police investigations going on around these councillors.
When Operation Aloft came, the other operation,
Operation Sheridan, yeah,
got suspended.
Okay, it got suspended because this was an even worse.
Because Operation Aloft
yeah,
was the largest case of fraud and corruption ever found in any form of governance ever in the UK.
And that was a police investigation into the Liverpool City Council.
In their practices.
Right. Well, I'm sure we're going to come back to that in a minute. But so
Without
Operation Aloft superseded Operation Sheridan because of the serious nature of the potential crimes that are being committed, and that put Operation Sheridan on the back burner, a £4 million investigation to focus on Aloft.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then just to add a cherry on the top,
there's another one.
You've got Operation Frenetic.
So there's another police investigation. This is separate.
Which no one knows about.
Okay, so Operation Frenetic has not gone public yet.
No.
Okay. So
that's encrypted phones.
Okay. EncroChat.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's a whole other conversation, but a fascinating one about
extremely.
But this police operation, which they cracked into encrypted phones, and it's ongoing now in the Supreme Court, I believe, whether the police could use the things they found in the EncroChat as evidence when it should only be regarded as intelligence. I think that's the argument that's happening with that case.
There's already been one case,
yeah,
in which the police won.
The police won, but I think that's been appealed, and that's what's in the Supreme Court now, because
that's right.
It's fundamental to the police's investigation powers. Is that when they tap a phone or they collect intelligence that's traditionally under the common law, that's never been allowed to be used as evidence. Right? It's only been allowed to be used as intelligence. So they've got to go and be there when the crime actually happens, right? And then say, this intelligence led us to this situation, to being able to see the crime happening, and we've made the arrests. But with Frenetic, I think what they did is they said, well, no, that's the evidence there. So it's anyway, the court are arguing it out at the moment. The police don't care. The police are making the arrests anyway. So we've got 3 police investigations. 3 of them involve, well, at least two of them involve Liverpool City Council.
All 3.
All 3 involve Liverpool City Council. And at the time you were dealing with Joe Anderson in the homeless shelter, when he was coming in, he didn't like what you were doing because he put his nose out of joint with his personal project. He was under investigation for Operation Sheridan at that point.
I don't know whether he was under investigation for Operation Sheridan. He got questioned over Operation Sheridan. His chief exec,
Jed Fitzgerald,
got arrested.
Yeah, and Jed Fitzgerald was the chief executive of Liverpool City Council. He was also the chief executive of Rotherham City Council during the the Rotherham rape gang scandal.
Sure.
He was also over that, so he's not shy when it comes to being around scandals in councils, is he, Jed Fitzgerald? It seems.
I don't know an awful lot about those issues in Rotherham. I do know.
I think it's on the public record, though, that, those crimes were committed. It took years for them to come to justice. It's still going on now. It's another conversation. But anyway, that's some of his background, where he came from. Then he went to West Lancashire Council. Then he came to Liverpool.
That's right.
And then this investigation has followed him around, basically.
And he brought various people with him.
Yeah.
Who were also part of that investigation.
Did Joe bring him into Liverpool City Council as the chief executive?
Well, the talk was, and I don't know how true it is, but I do know as part of the investigation, is that there were 3 women in front of Jed when Jed was picked on the system that they used to find out who was going to be the chief exec. And I believe that it was manipulated for Jed to get that key post.
It's not a insignificant post. I think the salary for that post is about 250,000 a year. Might be more, might be less. I'm not sure, but
I think it's about 230.
230 a year, and the perks that come with it.
Yeah.
Okay, so
and the pension.
Okay, that was going on.
Yeah.
During this key period in your story, which is the homeless shelter, and Joe comes in to have a look. He's not happy. Take it from there.
So I'm going to come back 4 months. So before I fell out with Joe, I was really close with Joe.
How did you become close with Joe?
So I never knew Joe, never met him before. I bought 30 James Street, called Albion House at the time, and I got to one of the council officers to get me a meeting with a guy called Nick Havana. I see Nick Havana. I said, "Look, Nick, I've got a great opportunity here to do 30 James Street."
Who's Nick Havana? What was his
He
role?
was head of planning.
Head of planning. Okay, so that's mentioned quite heavily later, isn't it?
He was Joe's number 2 guy.
Okay.
Like his guy, his go-to, get it done.
He's
guy.
his Rottweiler.
Yeah. They've all got Rottweilers, and he was one. I personally like Nick. Not that makes any relevance to what we're talking about, but I personally like him. So I've gone to Nick, and I don't know Nick that well. I said, "Look, I've got this opportunity to take this Grade 2 star listed building, derelict for 20 years, last used with drug rehab centre. It doesn't make economic sense. If you can get me the planning within 8 weeks, I can get the funding from my investors."
This is for James Street Hotel. This is the
James
Titanic Hotel that we talked about earlier, right?
So, funny story. Okay. So I'm talking to another developer in Liverpool, and I'm quite lowly to all these guys. These guys are seasoned, and I'm trying to learn. I'm a retailer really, and I'm trying to understand the game. So not only am I learning how to do online, content writing and posts and blogging and emails and all that crap, I'm also trying to understand how to build out and how to fund. So one day I get a call from this guy, and he says, "Oh, I've got 4 bloody Singaporeans coming over, and I've got no stock to sell them. Can you do me a favour? Will you take them around the city?" So I said, "Yeah, okay." So I took them around the city. I got on with them really, really well. Never seen them again. A year later, they phone me up and they say, "We're coming over to Liverpool. Really enjoyed your company. We'd like to take you out for a meal. That's okay." I said, "Really funny you should phone. I've got a building." So they said, "Great, okay, we'd love to invest in you." I said, "Oh, that's amazing, thank you." So 3 weeks later, they come over. Luckily for me, I had 19 units, and I'd sold the 19 units. So when they come over, they said, "Let's go and see the unit." And I said, "Oh, sorry, I've sold them." "Well, we want to invest in you." I said, "Oh, I'd love you to invest in me. I've got this building." Now, Albion House, i.e. 30 James Street, was up for sale. But the owner wouldn't let me in for some reason. So I used to bribe the caretaker with £20 to let me in. And then these guys just called me Mr. Titanic. So I ended up getting some impetus from them. They said they want to invest in it. In China, Singapore, Far East, Titanic is a major brand. Major brand. Number 2.
Everyone knows it.
Massive. So I thought, wow, I'm Mr. Titanic now. These guys are going to go back. And they've got something like 700 investors of their own that they have this pool of investors to go to. So I see the caretaker go in and see it for the last time, take them in there. They go home, and then they invite me up. So they said, "Come over to Singapore. We've got an event." So I said to my wife, Kate, I said, been invited over to Singapore. I'll go over and see what happens. I'm expecting to see about 3 or 4 investors. So when I get there, I've got a little video and stuff that I've done. I go up, I go into the room, and they go, "You ready?" I said, "For what?" They said, "Pull the curtain back for them."
Was a room full of investors?
700 investors.
700?
700. They said, "You've got to do about an hour and a half." I said, "I haven't got an hour, 1.5 minutes, never mind an hour and a half." He said, no. They've come to see Mr. Titanic. I was a thing then, I was a thing, I had a title. So anyway, I got up on the stage and I sold my soul for an hour and a half. Then the guy comes back on the stage and theatrically states...
So this, sorry to interrupt, because this is another innovation of yours, as far as I understand it, is that you would find investors for hotel rooms. Yeah, which was, I think it's an old idea, but you made it popular again, at least in Liverpool, that I know of.
I think there were other people doing it, but I think I sort of...
Because that was a key part of your success, wasn't it? Was being able to find investors to purchase a hotel room for which they'd get a return based upon the operation of the hotel.
I think it was fair to say that any funder bank would never go anywhere near a Grade 2 star listed building, and that's why they laid for so long. So to take on 65 individual investors, fractionalised in a way, didn't give them a voice as such to get involved, but actually allowed me to go and get on with the job. So I go up, he comes back on, he says, Lawrence Kenwright is going to stay for another hour and a half. If you want to buy, put your hands up. So about 400 hands go up. So you do the 300, he said, "Thank you very much, come back next month, we'll have something amazing to show you next month," and off they funnel out the door. And he says, "Lawrence Ken is going to get up close and personal with you now. Pick your chairs up and go in circles around him. He's going to stand in the middle of the floor." So stood in the middle of the floor, all the chairs went all around me. So like they are literally, Mr. Titanic, I'm like, wow. So another hour and a half goes by. And then this is the strangest thing I've ever seen in my life. So at the end of that, he says, "Right, who wants to buy?" So 400 hands go up. But I've only got 65 units. So he says, "Okay, what we're going to do, we're going to write our names on a piece of paper, we're going to put it in a hat.
Ballot.
I'm going to stand at the end, you're going to form an orderly, and you're going to go up." So the first one, guy goes, Yinghua. Yinghua screams, hands in the air, and legs it down the alleyway, runs up, gets the piece of paper, sticks it on his chest, and stands against the wall.
So you must have been in shock with this.
Oh, so I go,
what the fuck?
So I'm still not saying that because, there's no way you get money in the UK for that type of thing. 2, 3, 4. So I turned around to the guys organised. I went, knowing, but not knowing, "What's going on?" He said, "You've just took 400 grand. Oh, okay. So 65 later, took 6.5. Wow. There or thereabouts. So
who were these investors? Singaporeans, Malaysians, Chinese?
Singaporeans. All Singaporeans.
Okay.
So I sold 65 units. I jumped back on the plane that night. I was only there for like 12 hours or something. Flew in and flew back out again, as we had to do. I phoned my wife and
I got it.
I don't, but like it looks like. And anyway, so the money didn't come in as quick as what it should have.
Yeah.
So we went to buy it in the November. We didn't actually get it till the 28th of Feb. Don't forget, it's a Grade 2 star listed building, not being used for 20 years, in a poor state office, not a hotel. And I had to open it for the races. I had to open it for the races.
What, so do you mean for the entry race?
Yeah. Like the
massive event, event in Liverpool for the hotel business calendar, isn't it? It's one of the biggest events of the year.
6 weeks later.
Yeah.
So Grade 2 star listed.
So it was open 6 weeks later.
Yeah.
Wow.
So the team that we gained on that site are still with me today. We love each other. We're like brothers. And
you went to war together.
We went to war.
Yeah.
And we were doing 20-odd hour days every day for 6 weeks. We got 2 floors finished, so 20-odd rooms. We got the bar and the restaurant on the top floor, and the events in the main hall done. But we thought we were clever, but we weren't. So we weren't right on the first day. I mean, there's some amazing stories. Like the first day, these guys were going to 80 races, and one of my close friends now, Paul Egan, he's the manager at the time, really close to me. He's the manager, and he's working behind the reception desk, and this guy comes storming down the stairs, screaming at him, proper scouser, screaming at him, and says, "You put me in a room, there's no glass in the window." So that's how quick we were. Paul went, what? He went, there's no glass in the window. So Paul went, tell you what, go down the road, here's some money or whatever, and bought some drinks in the bar, whatever it was. A couple of hours later, he gets all the yellow pages, gets the glazer to come out. Glazer comes out, and he comes in, does the windows, comes back, says to Paul, pay me. So Paul pays him, gives him the money. Then Paul gets on the phone, phones the guy and says, hi sir, your room's ready. So the guy comes back in, goes into his room. 2 minutes later, the guy's coming down. He takes him out, tries to get him outside to beat him up. But I was like, what's wrong? He went, the glass, you lied to me, there's still no glass in it, freezing in the room. There were 6 rooms that didn't have glass in the windows. So, like, but you know, like we laugh about it now because it was so crazy and so mad. But we did get it open in time, and then we opened the floor a month. So we actually finished it. We started it on the 28th of Feb, and we finished it in August. Like unbelievable timescale. And then about 3 or 4 years later, we bought all those investors out. They all got 150 pence in the pound. So they put 100 grand in, they got 150 grand back.
So that's interesting, that because why would 65 Singaporean investors be jumping up and down to invest in Liverpool? Was Liverpool's brand at that point at a high water mark? Was that during Joe's reign, or was they just looking to invest in the British market?
Nothing to do with Joe at all. It was totally to do with LFC.
Yeah.
And Beatles, and a little bit of Titanic.
So the Liverpool brand had already preceded you before you got there.
Liverpool as a brand, I think, is as big as Manchester, if not bigger, when the further you go away from the UK.
Yeah.
The further you go away, Liverpool becomes bigger.
I remember about when Manchester were trying to do the Olympic bid. I forget what year it was 20 years ago. Nobody knew on an international level where Manchester was, so they had to say Manchester, which is near Liverpool. That was the only way.
Point.
Yeah.
So Liverpool is an enormous brand that I don't think needs an awful lot of fixing. But I think we have a couple of years of serious problems politically with fraud and corruption to get over, and we need our leader to understand how to get over that issue and almost paint a different picture. But that's another.
So that's how you met Joe, or how you became close
He helped me.
with Joe.
He helped me get planning for.
So helped James Street happen. 30 James Street happened. So
which is what a mayor should do.
Yeah. So you were close to Joe at that period, and I know you were a champion of Joe Anderson when he first came into office, and you thought he was, brilliant for the job, and you had nothing but respect for him. Now that began to deteriorate, I guess, during the homeless shelter period, and did your relationship begin to sour from there?
So I think I'm reasonably savvy. I think I'm quite streetwise. I'm a businessman, and politically I'm savvy now. I wasn't then. I didn't understand the nature.
Walked right into it. Liverpool politics.
I didn't understand the nature of the beast.
Yeah.
And I thought friendships were friendships. I think Joe smiled in my face and then laughed behind my back. I think Joe used his political powers to create malfeasance. Albeit, I'm sure he'll deny it, but I do believe I have a case against the council for malfeasance. And
against you?
Yeah, without doubt.
Yeah, because it wasn't long after that, was it? Right, it was that Liverpool's golden boy, if you like, started to receive some negative press in the Liverpool Echo. So there was starting to be some stories about you that were critical, or about what your project was, and the homeless shelter seemed to be the fulcrum of it. It seemed to be what they were attacking, and that began a series of challenges, didn't it, for you on a personal level? And tell us about that and what happened there.
So the homeless shelter clearly saved lives. The homeless shelter gave a belief back to a lot of people. Brian, who is a very good friend of mine now, when we got him, he was 8.5 stone. He's now got his life, he's now working, he's now got his home. And along with about another 15 or 20, just like Brian, but I've stayed close to Brian. Brian, when I first met him, said, all I want to do is see my son again. he's now met his son again. You know, these things that I think businesses in the future should be about social enterprises and seamlessly giving back, I've always believed in. So when we opened the shelter, I believed that I was doing exactly what Joe Anderson and the like would want, because I saw him as an entrepreneurial socialist just like myself. And I couldn't.
Do you think he looked at it more cynically, though, being a cynical politician?
Well, I'll go through the story. So an entrepreneurial socialist, in my view, is someone who seems to give back. I believe that's what Joe stood for. That's why I aligned myself to Joe so much. The problem what I had is, before I opened the homeless shelter, there was a story that went out in the Echo saying the outsider to run for mayor.
About you?
Yeah, and it was done by Liam Thorpe.
So they named you as a potential
outsider
challenger to Joe's office.
Yeah. Joe was then, he had Anne O'Byrne as the heir apparent. And then,
Anne O'Byrne's another Liverpool local politician.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also believe Derek Hatton was waiting in the wings when he got back into the Labour Party for the day. I think that was to have Len McCluskey back in with the NEC, for him to be the nomination for the Labour Party, which would be a shoo-in.
Because that's the interesting thing, isn't it? We talk about the mayor being a democratically elected politician in Liverpool with extraordinary power. However, the mayor is selected at the Labour Party level, because whoever wins the nomination becomes the mayor, because there is no opposition, there is no competition. It's a landslide for whoever is Labour's nomination.
But isn't that the same with MPs?
Well, I probably, but it just in terms of this one, it's like it's not democratic, is it? Because that selection is done privately from the public eye. It's done internally between the Labour Party. Like Joanne Anderson, who is now the current mayor, as soon as she was nominated, that was it. She was a shoo-in for mayor.
Well, there's a whole story behind that as well. But the system is based on a 2-horse race, isn't it?
But there isn't. There's only one horse in Liverpool.
Well, in Liverpool there is. But I'm talking about in general now. In general, it's a 2-horse race.
But it could be as many horses as enter the race, in terms of anyone's allowed to stand, aren't they? But it seems in Liverpool, it's a one-party state, and democracy, suffers as a result.
So Liverpool vote via the badge and not about the skill set. Yeah. And that's my biggest argument. My biggest argument is, if you take that Liverpool's got 90 councillors, which it has, and I think Labour's got something like 75 of those. So they are
3 councillors per ward, isn't it?
3 councillors per ward.
Yeah.
And there is a conversation now that the government have now took over 3 areas within the council, that if there are more arrests and charges, which I believe are coming, if there are, I think the ministers will take that as an opportunity to take over the city. Now, an awful lot of Scousers will turn around and say, we don't want the Conservative Party here because they weren't elected in. It isn't the Conservative Party as such, it's the ministers that would take over. Liverpool has a deficit of £33 million over the next 3 years to find. We've already cut all the meat off the bone. There's probably not an awful lot of meat left. If those ministers take over, we haven't got an issue. And I do believe the government will do whatever they can to make the garden as rosy as possible. Now, I don't care who pays in order for the city to get rid of its austerity and its issues. I don't care what badge it is. I don't care if it's red or it's blue. If someone's willing to spend money, just like Heseltine did in the Thatcher era, he came here with the blessing of Thatcher after Thatcher bludgeoned us. But then they realised the severity of that battle with Hatton, and how much they used the people as fodder in order to cause issue. And I think...
we were punished. We were politically punished, weren't we?
But a little bit more than that. I think they were quite happy with Derek Hatton being sort of dominant in the city.
Well, they gave them a bogeyman, didn't they? They gave them an opposition and an enemy to attack.
Even Kinnock didn't want him.
Yeah, no one
so I think it was to the betterment of the Conservatives in the end. And I think when they realised how severe they treated the people of this city who had done nothing wrong, I think then they sent over the blessing, and the blessing was Heseltine. And I think he's our most beloved Conservative, because what he done in our city is here to see. You know, Albert Dock was
You'll
him.
face some criticism for that in Liverpool.
I honest to God, I will stand toe to toe with anyone over that.
Yeah, okay. Fair enough.
Heseltine is an
honesty.
amazing human being, and what he done for our city is the reason why we're here today. Without the Albert Dock, you wouldn't have got Liverpool 1. Without Liverpool 1, you wouldn't be where you are now.
Yeah. I'm not a fan of Heseltine, but that's another.
I'm not talking about what else he's done.
Yeah, but okay.
I'm talking about what he done for our city.
Okay, I recognise that because he came in, didn't he? He's the minister for Liverpool, and he was meant to, you know, like ministers are being brought in.
He built the Eldonians. He desilted the Mersey.
Yeah.
He done so much. He done the Festival Gardens. He done so much for the city that got us onto a trajectory where we are today. And without him, for a fact, we probably wouldn't be here now, because our population would have probably dwindled down to 200,000, because there'd be no way to employ people. We lost 100,000 people in the Hatton era. And we would have lost a hell of a lot more if that funding didn't come in based on Heseltine. Heseltine forced his way in to ensure that we gained that money.
Didn't he buy the Albert Dock for £1?
Well, it wasn't him, was it? You know, he didn't buy it, but certainly the quango that was put in place to bring that around was truly successful, wasn't it?
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? You know, that's one of the issues with Liverpool City Council, is selling off public land for of lower valuation than what it's actually worth, which we will get to. And Albert Dock was restored, wasn't it, from this derelict building, which is now one of the jewels in the crown of Liverpool's architectural layout, you know. So we got here because we were talking about Liam Thorpe writing an article about you, which they predicted that you could have been an independent challenger to Joe Anderson's mayoral office.
Not so much independent, possible Labour nomination. I'm a Labour member, still a Labour member.
Right. So how was that received? And do you think that was you being named as a potential threat to Joe Anderson? Len McCluskey, was he involved with Joe Anderson at this point? Was this something they were trying to block you from doing? You know, what's your take on them calling you out as saying that you're a potential? Because I know you've never said publicly that you want to run for mayor, or have you? I don't know.
No.
Right. So you've never said that. So with the Echo, the mouthpiece of the Labour Party in Liverpool, saying that about you, do you think that was a catalyst, a trigger point for what came next, which I've heard you say before, something like 81 articles written about you in the Echo, or negative articles, because it became like a flurry, wasn't it? It wasn't just one or two.
But you knew it was, and you witnessed it, so it was your view?
Yeah, so my view was that all of a sudden it turned sour for you, right? And from you were the golden boy, Mr. Liverpool, and doing all these things, and doing this social kind of action, this social activism as part of, at the same time, being the capitalist hotelier that you were, you were also giving back to the community. So I always kind of questioned why they would attack you, and they certainly did. They certainly came for you, both guns blazing, and then all of a sudden...
Have you ever seen 85 stories written about anyone?
Well, I didn't count them, but what happens is when it becomes a flurry of articles, you just see it as like it was an attack on you personally, on your character and on your reputation. Now, I know from attacks made on me personally, what they do is they're trying to make people lose your support, basically. Your popular support within the city, with the everyday Scouser seeing that you're doing good and doing good for people in Liverpool. All of a sudden they don't see that anymore. They start to see things like corruption and fraud and whatever else they were accusing you of, designed to attack your reputation, so that if you decided to run at some point in the future, you had to an uphill struggle to then come out and say, well, all this is fake and all this is lies, but the damage is done. So I thought it was a political hatchet job, in order to hamstring any political ambitions you may have had at that time. Would you say that was an accurate assessment of the situation?
You just answered for me.
Yeah.
So let me just come back a little bit. So Joe Anderson ran for Walton MP. Mm-hmm. He didn't get it because Len McCluskey turned round to Corbyn and said, I will not give you £1 million to the Labour Party if Dan Carden doesn't get that job.
So Dan Carden is the MP for Anfield. Walton, right? Yeah. And he is Len McCluskey's
very able politician, by the way.
Yeah. So but he's been put in place by Len McCluskey from Unite the Union. Yeah.
Joe then goes for the Metro Mayor.
The Metro Mayor is a new office that's being created that covers Greater Merseyside, not just Liverpool.
Covers 6 areas.
Covers 6 areas. Yeah. Is it a more powerful position than the Mayor of Liverpool?
I would say. No.
Okay.
I would say Liverpool is lead brand, and Liverpool has an enormous spend, and the councillors that sit in Liverpool, in some ways, are more important than MPs, and that's a whole other discussion. But certainly councillors spend an awful lot of money, or are involved in the spend of an awful lot of money, whereas MPs aren't really. MPs really just sit in the House of Parliament, and I'm not. In any way casting disparagement upon MPs, what they do. I'm sure it's a great job. They certainly get well paid for it, certainly get a great pension. They sit there and they govern, and they come up with new laws and whatever they do. But actually locally they don't do a damn thing. Councillors and councils run cities. So Steve Rotherham is Metro Mayor, and by I'm not saying one bit that he is in any way like Joe. As far as I know, he's very capable, does a great job. I'd like to see him lead more. I'd like to have seen him come into the fray and take control. But what actually happened was, when Joe stood down, or was forced to stand down, Joanne Anderson, strange name, ended up taking over. But she
was elected, wasn't she?
So let's get to that point again. Steve Rotherham's extremely powerful within the Labour Party.
Yeah.
He was Corbyn's bag carrier before, but he's also politically savvy and he understands how to play the game. Joanne Anderson works very closely with him. And I would say it was Steve Rotherham that led her by the hand to that job.
Because she's almost like silent, isn't she? Compared to Joe Anderson, who was, very vocal. He was, it was all over the press.
It's a big move for her, It's a big move, and by the way, I don't think Joanne Anderson isn't like Joe Anderson either. But I think Joanne Anderson came to the fray saying that she was going to disband the office, the mayor position. That's gone very quiet, probably because Steve Rotherham is now all powerful. Probably, and I'm fine, and that's the way that goes. That's fine. Don't forget, Manchester hasn't got that. Andy Burnham is the mayor. And he has Lease.
He's the Metro Mayor.
He is the equivalent of, and he has Lease, who is the leader.
Yeah.
Now, Lease as the leader is not as powerful, or what Joe Anderson was extremely powerful as the mayor, more powerful than any other mayor, in my view, because he'd been in power for that long. He didn't have to walk down the more accustomed corridors of power. He could create, and did create, his own corridors of power. Those corridors of power is ultimately what's going to get him into trouble. The problem what the regime has now is, how does it pull itself away when the mechanism that supported Joe is still in place? And that's a problem for Keir Starmer, because the elections are going to be next May 23.
What, election for Liverpool mayoral office?
So what normally happens is, when you get elections in Liverpool, it's every year with 1 year out. So 1/3 of all councillors go up for election every year.
So we're in a constant election cycle, aren't we, in Liverpool?
Yeah, not now. Yeah. So when the government jumped in and they took over 3 departments, those 3 departments, I think, will end up being the entire department. The whole council, the whole gig, I think, in the end. And I'm embracing that. I think that's an amazing thing for us. The problem that the councillors have is that they were part of that mechanism. And when they go for election all together at once in 23, if the noise of fraud and corruption is that loud, and I do think it will be, I think it's far greater than anyone has any understanding of.
Well, let's focus on that a little bit then, because I think.
But when that happens, I think Labour Party has a very a big disadvantage if another party makes a play.
So you personally faced persecution and harassment in the media. Did the police get involved at any point?
Yep.
Yeah, so you had the full court press, right, from potentially from the office of mayor orchestrating events in order to crush a realistic threat to his position in Liverpool. It's one way of looking at it, right? Now, what that kind of leads to is the levels of fraud and corruption in Liverpool City Council. You know, we can see signs of it in what they did to you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, how do you respond to, first of all, let's deal with you, right? How do you respond to some of the allegations and criticisms that have been made against you in relation to, you know, investors or your business model? What's your position on that?
Before we get to that,
Yeah.
I think I need to finish off what happened with Joe.
Go on.
So Joe went for the Metro Mayor and obviously failed there.
Yeah.
He had promised Anne O'Byrne that she was going to be the next mayor. Mm-hmm. And these are all facts, by the way. They're not up for contention. It's a fact. And then he started speaking to me. Now, he started speaking to me because if I done anything online, I would get huge traction online, and he knew it. So I went to his house 4 times in 4 weeks, every Tuesday, to his own home. And I would go there quite a bit. And I went there as a friend, but this time I was going there as the possible next of kin to his throne, talking about what are the options.
The succession.
Yeah, what are the options to that? And I, rightly or wrongly, turned around to him one day and I said, I will not look over my shoulder. It's not for me to look backwards, I want to look forwards. So if I do this, I think I'm perfectly placed because I understand about narrative. I am very good at creating narrative. I'm very good at bringing in investment. And I'm very good at creating jobs. And I see that as the amber nectar to all things. I think if you do that, everything cascades down. But I also understand the bottom of the pyramid. I understand about the importance of looking after our most vulnerable, more than anyone else, because I lived with them for so long. Mm-hmm. Joe was very down at the time. Then Derek Hatton got back in the Labour Party for the day.
One day.
I'm sure Keir Starmer kicked him back into touch.
Yeah, wasn't he accused of anti-Semitism or something like that? And it was gone.
And that's how he got pulled out.
So why did that happen? Why did he rejoin the Labour Party?
I'll tell you now.
Okay.
So Len McCluskey was backing him.
Yeah. Was backing Hatton.
Close, mates. Close.
Wow.
All that Flanagan thing and all them, they're all close.
Yeah.
McCluskey would go to their box at Liverpool every home game. So McCluskey was backing Hatton. Hatton can only get that position if he's in the Labour Party. I think Keir Starmer, don't have no proof of that, threw him out. I think Derek Hatton then wanted to be the puppet master. So Derek Hatton went and picked up Joe's slopey shoulders and propped him up against the wall and said, we're going to back you. Now, Len McCluskey put Dan Carden in to beat Joe. Len McCluskey was no fan of Joe's. But the silver tongue of Derek won Len round. So Len and Derek were then backing him up.
Because weren't they originally not enemies, Len and Derek Hatton and Joe? They didn't really respect each other at the beginning, did they? Didn't they become friends?
Joe didn't like Derek. Derek didn't like Joe. But Len and
Derek Hatton is a legendary figure in Liverpool politics. For anyone that doesn't know, you know, in the 1980s he was famous for shouting out publicly against Thatcher, and he led the Trotskyite militant faction of the Labour Party, and ultimately he was kicked out of the Labour Party by Neil Kinnock, and the Thatcher regime used that as an excuse to punish Liverpool for what happened with Hatton. And then Hatton disappeared from politics, became a businessman, and has re-emerged amongst this entire Joe Anderson scandal, and he has a part to play in this story which I think hasn't been fully revealed yet. I think that's to come in the future, maybe.
Well, you've got to remember that Derek is someone that has been in front of a jury before and walked. Derek is a very intelligent,
very charismatic. You know, he's been around for a long time. He knows all the players. He knows all the moves.
Well, he's blessed with 2 skills, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's very charismatic and he's extremely clever.
Yeah.
I don't think he'll get into any trouble now. But I do think Joe will. I don't think Joe's at the same level as Derek.
So Derek comes into the story. Derek Hatton comes into the story, props Joe up because Joe's feeling down in the dumps. Yeah, and then taking it from there.
So Len is a Rasputin figure within the Labour Party, in my view. To have Len's backing means, at that time, don't forget, with Corbyn.
So Len McCluskey was the chairman of Unite the Union, the biggest...
Chief exec, probably.
Chief exec,
yeah.
Chief
Unite
exec of Unite, which is the biggest union
not now.
In the country with 3 million members.
Yeah. And was the main funder to the Labour Party.
Yeah.
So that Rasputin figure is very apt because he controlled a lot of what the Labour Party's done. And, you know, he was also very strong in the Labour Party because of Corbyn. So when Len wanted something to happen, it happened. He was the puppet master to Corbyn, in effect. So when he came and rallied behind Joe's slopey shoulders almost, you know, shot out. And then the thought of me becoming the mayor one day then got through into pasture. A couple of days later, Derek Hatton phoned me and said, can I meet you? He walked around my office. I probably had 20 people in the social online team. I had 100 people in the head office. I had a £250 million business at the time. And I think he realised just how strong I was. Because I had more on my social team than what the Labour Party did. And he said that. 2 days later...
And that potentially would win or lose an election.
Of course.
Having a very strong social media team, because, you know, that's where elections are now won and lost. And
they're still leafleting, aren't they?
Yeah.
They don't really understand that.
Yeah.
And then Len McCluskey phoned me and said, "When are you in London next?" I said, "It'll be 3 days or whatever." So I went down to see Len. I was with him for an hour and a half. Both Len and Derek both turned around to me and said, "Are you going to run?" And I said to both of them, "I have no intention of running if Joe's running." I had loyalty to Joe. They said, "No, we don't think you're going to run for the Labour ticket because you're not going to get it." They were quite blunt over that. And I said, "No, I know I'm not going to get it. We're talking about you running as an independent." Now, Joe had said
so
to me...
So they asked you outright if you were going to run?
But Joe had sat with me a few times and said, "You could beat me as an independent." And at the time, I would have beat him. It's only 52,000 votes. And I had a huge traction at the time.
Was this before or after the persecution in the press?
Well, so next phase is, I said no, no, and no.
Yeah.
And then later on, I've opened the homeless shelter. That is seen as a political play, which it would be. And it was a huge success, massive success. If I've done a post on social media, I get thousands and thousands of shares, not reach, shares. If they done something on social media, they get like 3 or 4. No one's bothered. So there was a rich vein that I hit there that they were very, very, very scared of. So
but
then
you were a real threat.
Oh, I was a big threat.
And they wanted to maintain control of the mayor's office in Liverpool because outside of London, I think it was one of the most powerful political offices that existed because of the nature of how they set up, you know, the mayor of Liverpool.
Well, Joe was voted in the top 10 most influential people in the UK.
There you go.
So, extremely, extremely powerful, and I know that because I was bludgeoned on his sword, so I understood. I'm starting to understand just how powerful he was. So when he turned round to the Echo, I believe, to come after me because the Echo gained 1.4 million, or did gain, not now, did gain 1.4 million a year in advertising revenue from the council. That was really a big stick for Joe to make sure that the stories didn't resonate about him. And just to add a little bit more meat on the bone to what I'm stating there, the editor
of the
Echo, on his leave and do, invited Joe as the main speaker, who spoke of the editor in very high regard. And then Joe gave him a job at the ACC on 170 grand a year. So not only were the Echo getting 100 and
golden parachute,
golden parachute from a non-related body.
Yeah.
Clearly, that was a thank you for looking after his online presence. We all know that newspapers are yesterday's chip paper, but they are today's Google page. And so when I had 85 negative stories written on me, and that started with the homeless shelters, and the homeless shelter, if you can imagine, I'm a guy who's very much online, and my Google page is sacrosanct. It's so important to me. And if someone sees Signature Living or Shankly or whatever it may be, the next thing they're going to look for, if they're looking to invest, is Lawrence Kenwright. Every single story was lambasted with every single brand of mine. And
it's the modus operandi of the people who've attacked you, is to go after your character and your reputation.
Sure. But just to get into the detail of, if Joe Anderson had a story about him, and he has had some negative stories now, clearly because he's been arrested, you'll see there'll always be 4 links in every Echo story. And the links are the ones that are in red, which means if you want to caveat off into a different story, that's related normally. So with Joe's, it was government-led, but not related to him. With mine were all related to other stories, which meant that it created a labyrinth of stories that you couldn't navigate away from if you followed those connections. Whereas with Joe's ones, you could navigate away with the next click. With mine, it would go to a story within a story within a story within a story. So now,
so it's like, instead of being purveyors of truth, which is what an independent free press should be, it becomes a weapon in the hands of politicians.
But we all know that, don't we?
Yeah, but it needs to be stated.
So if you wanted to invest in one of my apartments or rooms, you would go online, you'd check out Signature, you'd check out Shankly, you'd check out Lawrence Kenwright, and then you'd see, some days in the Echo I had 3 negative stories on 3, like page 3, page 8, and page 12, all different stories, all relating to me, but all interlinked. So you would go on there, and I always remember the first story that went out was, we were coming to the end of operating our winter homeless shelter, and we've been seeing Frank Hunt and Christine Banks and Joanne Kushner every week to decant out of the shelter in a harmonious manner, in line with the council, and there was no issue whatsoever. And on this one day, we were supposed to come out of one of the rooms that we had, because we'd expanded so much, because there was so many homeless people, and those homeless people always leave their unwanted fodder, so we had to bag it up and box it up. The council were due to pick it up. They didn't pick it up for 36 hours. And then when they did come 36 hours later, the homeless people had gone into the boxes and strewn all the contents all over the car park, an open car park in an area that's been a drug area for 20 years. Now, on that car park, we'd had what we called the sharps room. Now, I asked the chief constable to come down and see it. He viewed it. He said, okay, it's not official, but I understand it's there and I know why you're doing it. The reason why I done it is I wouldn't let them take drugs in the room. Not my fault they take drugs, by the way. Didn't want to take drugs in the room, but I also didn't want them to take drugs in doorways where they would just throw the unwanted needle on the floor and some child would pick it up. So we created a portaloo and called it a sharps room, where they get rid of needles properly. 3 o'clock in the morning, the night's team went into the sharps room, took pictures not only of the needles in the sharps room, again, not my fault, nothing to do with me. They also took pictures in the gutters up and down the street. Unprecedented for the council to send the pictures to the Echo within 2 hours. So it's gone through no council process. It hasn't gone to council officers. It hasn't gone to anyone. It's gone from the council officers to Nick Small. Nick Small has sent those pictures onto the Echo. By that day, 3 o'clock, Kenwright drugs on the front page.
Yeah, so the Kenwright drugs is the headline you would chase them, isn't it? And that's
for someone that has never drank a lager or a wine in his life. To put that on the front was utterly devastating. But stopped my cash flow immediately.
Wow.
And then they done it again.
Do you know what to do?
Then they done it again. So I had 3 stories in 3 weeks. I ended up with about 24 negative stories on the homeless shelter. But during that time, Stoke Council came with the leader of the council, MPs, and all various people, and a guy called Lou Macari, you might know, played for Man United. And they copied our next shelter, which was Cotton Street. And now in Stoke, if you go to Stoke, Lou Macari shelter is modelled on ours. So isn't it strange that one council sees that as hope and glory and the other council sees it as...
Well, it was clearly a political hatchet job, wasn't it?
So at the same time, Ladbury House had a complaint. I put an FOI in. How many complaints were given on Ladbury House at the same time of us not gaining one? Why was there 20 odd stories on us?
Lavray House is Joe Anderson's operation.
Why were there 20 odd stories on us in the Echo when we never had one single complaint? When Lavray House had multiple complaints, many complaints, not one single entry into the Echo, and there is the proof of the collusion between the Echo and the council in order to bring me down.
Okay, so I think that's quite clear for observers of what was going on there. Again, that's proved later. But before we move into that, so what is, like we touched on it before, what is your response to some of the criticism that you faced, some of the allegations about investors and stuff like that? How would you answer that?
So at the time of all this happening, we had 22 building sites.
Yeah.
We had £250 million worth of development on our books. Our money stopped overnight. So we got squeezed.
Okay, so as a result of this bad press, it affected your cash flow as a business, and your ability to operate.
Obviously.
Yeah.
So
they were trying to take you out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we decided to sell Shankly and James Street.
As a result of this?
As a result of that.
Okay.
I owed 22 million on the two, and I sold them. I had them sale agreed for 48. So we were well ahead. It would have been great.
And that would have settled
the
issues
in that 22. That's the 22 investors' money.
Yeah.
That would have been theirs. So what actually happened was we told our investors that they were getting their money back, and then Brexit happened, and the people who were buying it couldn't get their money in. So now I've got a lot of frustrated investors that were due to get paid, and they didn't get paid because they didn't sell. So the money's locked in the building. I haven't took it out. It's still there. It's still here today. So when we went into COVID, we had a lot of frustrated investors who were wrong because I hadn't took the money out, who were stating, where's our money? It's still in the bricks and mortar. You've only got an argument if I've sold it and I've kept it. I haven't sold it. It's still there.
Because didn't they buy the bricks and mortar
so
on a lease or something?
Yeah, we had 125 individual investors who all bought what we call a key. And the key is a room, a bedroom. And let's just say on average they spent £100,000 per key. We now are in administration to save ourselves against those investors who were trying to come after us while we were closed.
Because that was quite a big splash in the press, wasn't it, as well, when it looked like this was going to go down, the Shankly. Yeah, they didn't pull any punches there either, did they?
Well, they actually used the word collapsed.
Yeah.
And yet Dixie Dean never went.
Yeah.
Alma de Cuba never went.
Because that's what I thought as an outside observer.
Raynell Hall never went.
It's over for Kenwright. Yeah.
So Dixie Dean didn't go.
Yeah.
Alma de Cuba didn't go. Raynell Hall didn't go. Kingsway House didn't go. Preston didn't go. Manchester didn't go. There were a whole cluster of sites that didn't go. Now, when the Trafford Centre went into administration, like we did, the shops didn't go into administration. Their operation carried on. Our operations didn't go into administration either.
So it was the ownership of the buildings.
So when they said collapsed,
it
was
inaccurate.
Totally inaccurate. And that again caused me
of course
huge issues. And so we had no choice in the end but to go into administration.
On the building side of it?
On the building side only.
Yeah.
Not on the operational side.
So where do you stand right now with your investors? Have you mediated the situation?
So look, there's plenty of issues there for me to go and deal with. And the first one I'm dealing with is the Shankly. Shankly's in administration. I have stayed here, worked round the clock, many days, changed the business plan, changed how it operates in order to meet a customer base that doesn't support or doesn't have any tourism. So we changed when we opened on the 4th of July, not this year, not the year before. We opened with the view of an event with a bed. So we put events on the roof. And we sort of fell foul of COVID there as well, because we found that health and safety and the licence department worked at two different rule books. And when we opened the roof, which we sit on now, we can get 1,100 people on the roof, and we only put 300 people on the roof, obviously because of regulations or whatever. And the first day we opened, we had 2 Black Mariahs outside, police on horseback, and police running through the building.
Finally come for Kenwright.
I think that was a sliding doors moment, that, because if I'd have gone then, the Echo would have put
Kenwright
put lives at risk, and the administrators would have ran a mile from me and threw me out.
So that's interesting. So that you think that was a critical moment in this story then?
Factually.
Yeah.
So someone looked down on me that day.
Yeah.
And I was clever enough to ensure that I had someone who could speak apples with them. So I had my own health and safety executive.
So they could talk
24/7.
Yeah.
So when they come in and started to try and blindside us, he would say, no. It is the music. Well, at the time, I think we could have 6 on the table, but you were allowed to dance in the same spot, but you weren't allowed to dance together.
Yeah, because COVID travels at a certain height. If you sit down, you're safe. If you stand up, you better be careful.
Yeah, and you weren't allowed to sing. So when they walked in, I think a girl was dancing where their seat was on her own, but just throwing her hands in the air. And yet there's been no official outbreak of COVID outdoors ever. Okay, but that's with hindsight. So that was a pivotal moment for me, that they came to close me down, still under the influence of Joe.
Because Joe was still in position then?
He was still in position.
Right, okay.
I was lucky that I worked really well with the administrators, and they allowed me to continue to run the site as I wished to, and they gave me a lot of freedom. This building's now getting sold to a company I'm working with, and I believe, although not confirmed, I believe the investors will get more than what they invested in.
So you're confident that the people who think that the investors who invested in you
in here,
in this building where you've faced some criticism, you're confident that you'll be able to resolve them issues for them, and they'll be happy about the situation to the best of your abilities?
Okay, I'm just going to enlarge upon that. Normally when it's in administration, administration is the same as Chapter 11 in America. But in the UK, it's a fraudulent system. It doesn't work how it's supposed to work. It ends up being a receivership. That's how it sort of works. And not many people come out of administration. In America, Chapter 11, a lot of people come out of that form of administration there. So not only did I have 96% of my investors vote for me, I also...
so they voted for you to remain the operator of this business?
Yes.
When they could have got rid of you if they wanted to?
Yes.
Yeah. So
well, I invited the investors in.
The proof of the pudding's in the eating, isn't it then?
I invited the investors in to become my boss, to show that I hadn't taken any money out and I am willing to grind out a result. And that's exactly what I've done. So in Shankly, I had a lot of scope to rechange, and I think the skill of the administrator was to see that skill and let me run with it. The upside of that is that the fund that's coming in, hopefully next couple of months, and normally an administration receives it with liquidation, does never get more than 10p in a pound return for the investors. I think mine's going to be over 100 pence in a pound. And I don't think that has ever happened before in the UK. And if it has, please someone tell me, because I don't know of it, and I've searched. Okay. So that is only on Shankly. I've got a number of other sites to go and work through. But when I start with that, I'm cleaning up my name then. I am the only reason why this is getting that level. Because my style of hotels are inoperable by other operators. Because I'm
innovation, isn't it?
I'm dancing to a different tune. And they don't understand that tune. And most hotel operators are very pre-DNA'd into a Hilton style uniformed offer. Mine is anything but. I'm wabi sabi, aren't I? I'm trying to be something completely different. Otherwise, I don't get seen. If I don't get seen, I fall into their forest. If I fall into their forest, then I'm going to fall into a battle with them that I cannot win because they got more money, more funds, bigger size, whatever. I have to create my own garden, and I think I have created my own garden. I think we are the main operator of anything above 2. We are the experts. We are also the Instagrammable hotel. And I don't think people want to go and boast about Travelodge. And I think those people...
So you're the best person to turn this around.
I've done it. That, by the way, it's under exclusivity at the moment to be purchased by a fund now. And I am the reason for that. Fact. And without me, the fund have said they wouldn't have bought it. So I'm going with the fund. And I'll be in partnership with the fund, and I have made sure that everyone gets their money back.
Good.
And more.
Good.
And that's a fact.
Okay, good. I appreciate you telling me that. That's honest of you. So let's move on.
Sorry, let me just run that.
So keep going.
So what normally happens is, in this world of funding, developer gets blamed for everything. He runs as far away as he can and gets blamed for everything. And look, I'm sure they've done wrong, but also there's an awful lot of funds out there that fund to fail.
Mm-hmm. To make more money from the failure than they do from success.
And that is a term that's known in my sector that other people probably don't even know about.
Fund to fail.
Fund to fail is when, let's just say I've got a £10 million site end value.
Yeah.
And let's just say to buy it I need 3, and to develop it out I need 5. So on the 3 I have to put £1 million, bank put in 2, I put in 1. On the 5 I put 1.5 in, they put in 3.5. So in total I put in 2.5 million. When it comes to a certain point, if I've defaulted, and what better time to default than during the pandemic? And you could claim force majeure, but it can be very difficult to get over the line, especially now. So they can come in and go, he's only got about 2 million more to spend. We can gain his 2.5 million and his profit. Now that factually does happen. So that
and who are the instigators of that? The bank,
of course.
Yeah.
What's happened is the standardised banks with their very low interest have left the industry, because they're not the experts at fund to fail.
Wow.
So they give the funding at their 1.5, whatever, 2%, 3%, whatever it is, to those funds. Those funds then, because they don't want to be tarnished, but they're happy with the 1 or 2 or 3%, but they print the money themselves anyway. And then that money then goes out, and then that goes out at 10, 12% default interest. So I just lost £11 million just in default interest. I don't see that money as mine. I see that as my investors' money. I'm here fighting for my investors. I'm not here fighting for myself. Whatever I've lost, I've lost. I lost £120 million. I'm not complaining. I don't care about money. I'm here only for my investors. And I think the first brick in my wall of stability will be when I paid back my Shankly investors. And I will use that as a pillar of strength, and I will go from that point on to then take on the other sites that I've got to do. And so we're already, I won't mention the other sites, but we're already in negotiation to do the other sites.
But I don't think people can ask for more than that. If you're being honest and you're telling us that as it is, and if you're not being honest, it'll come back to haunt you, won't it? So I think it's important to hear it from the horse's mouth, and I hope any investors listening, take confidence from it, because I think it's an important point, especially because of your position in the city and what's happening next, which I think if we move on to. Fraud and corruption in Liverpool, which this story so far leads us up to. And Joe Anderson, unfortunately for Joe Anderson, is at the centre of this entire narrative and scandal that has engulfed the city. Now, I remember during COVID, when we were out protesting on the street, and we were protesting the loss of our fundamental human rights, which was the right to protest, the right to assembly, and no one has that power to take that away from us. And we were out protesting the loss of those fundamental rights. The Echo decided to try and slander us and defame us and calling us all the names, but most importantly, Joe Anderson came out and said we were an embarrassment to the city. I took great offence to that. Right? And at the time, during the protest, there was one particular little area where we went round the town hall, and people were chanting, "Joe must go, Joe must go, Joe must go." And then it was like this kind of like divine intervention. A week later, it was announced that Joe Anderson, the mayor of Liverpool, had been arrested by the police for, I think it was witness intimidation, and we cheered as a group of people who were protesting the loss of our rights, and having our leader condemning us instead of standing up for what we were doing, because we weren't hurting anyone, we were just expressing what we believed to be true. So it was like a strange divine intervention that while he was calling us an embarrassment to the city, he has now brought this city into disrepute, or the reputation that we've worked so hard to rebuild over the last 20 years is now at threat thanks to what's been going on in Liverpool City Council. Now, people could say we're speculating here, or, you know, there's a bit of sour grapes going on from maybe either side. However, you put me on to something called the Max Caller Report.
Just before you get into that, do you not think it's very, very strange that freedom of speech is normally a left-wing policy?
But it's meant to be social justice, isn't it?
And yet it seems to be the left-wing side of politics that's trying to close it down. And weirdly enough, it's the right-wing in politics that are standing up for free speech.
It's all over the place. I don't even know what the labels mean anymore.
Do you not think that is an anomaly which you never would have thought you found?
I totally, and I grew up, you know, in a very left-wing family. Labour, you know, our entire lives. My grandmother was a Labour councillor for 30 years. She became mayor of Knowsley, right? And, you know, we were brought up fighting for our human rights from the oppression that we felt from the Tories and stuff like that.
And freedom of speech, you know, the miners, dockers, freedom of speech, left-wing policy, and yet
that's the first right.
It's left-wing who's closing you down.
Who's closing us down?
Trudeau.
Yeah, but what are they afraid of? Why are they afraid of what we've got to say? What is it that we've got to say that needs to be suppressed? Why are words so dangerous that they need to remove our fundamental rights and freedoms because they don't want to hear the words?
Do you not think it's very strange the way the Democrats are almost fighting for big business? Pharma, online, social media, Facebook. There's Zuckerberg spending 417 on Biden's campaign. You know, there is a definite shift.
It's like a global communism, though, isn't it? It's like, you know, it's the corporations. Some people call it fascism. They call the marriage of corporate power and government, you know, fascism. I think it's probably an inaccurate description. I think, you know, international communism is probably more to worry about because, you know, China, the second biggest economy in the world, is literally a communist country.
It's a hybrid.
It's a hybrid, yeah, but they still recognise
entrepreneurial socialism.
Well, maybe, right? But the thing is, Xi Jinping will come out and say that, you know, the ideological founders of Chinese communism is Marx and Lenin, right? So that's another argument. But yeah, it is interesting how the left are the ones who are now suppressing free speech. Why are they trying to suppress free speech?
Who were the bastions of free speech through the miners' strikes, through the dockers.
And that's what the Echo, you know, acts as the mouthpiece of this tyrannical power. And people who speak out or want to be heard are slandered, are libelled, are defamed in order to silence them, or if it won't silence them, to scare off or ward off people from listening to them because their ideas are dangerous, right?
Anyway.
But it's important because it's probably, you know, ties into the Max Caller report because that's what comes from the pages is the fear and intimidation that was run in Liverpool City Council to silence people from speaking out. However, so the Max Caller report, which you sent to me and I didn't even know existed, there's an article of it in the Echo written by Liam Thorpe, funnily enough. And it's critical, you know, but it's balanced. And, you know, like he says in the article, it's not a sexy document. It's a government document telling you how the inner workings of local government and what's going on in Liverpool. And this document is pretty damning. It condemns Liverpool City Council. How they've been getting run over the last 10 years or more, I'm not sure. Joe Anderson's leadership of fear and intimidation. These are words that are in the report. It's not me just making this up. And I was quite, you know,
taken aback,
but a little bit like disappointed and deflated at the language used by the Max Caller report about Liverpool, and saying that Liverpool worked hard to shed this idea of being a basket case from the 80s with the Derek Hatton era, and now there's a danger that we could fall back into that description of being a basket case due to the levels of incompetence as well as corruption in the council, because I don't think it was just all corruption. If you read the Max Caller report, it's like they just don't know what they're doing. They don't have the skill sets like you talk about. They don't particularly want to bring in the skill sets. And then there was lots of fraud and backhanders and developers buying land for nothing, and it was just a big mess. And I don't blame the developers, and I don't blame even some of the crooks, right? It's the politicians that make the decisions. It's the politicians that allow this level of corruption to happen in Liverpool. And I think it's an important pivotal moment in Liverpool's modern history, because in the report itself it recommends that government inspectors, government commissioners come in and keep an eye on Liverpool City Council to make sure that this corruption that's happening in the core of Liverpool City Council comes to an end. Tell me what your findings are, what your knowledge is and insight into this Max Kohler report, and how damaging you think it is.
So the Max Kohler report is tip of the iceberg. These guys have come in and have...
He's been sent in by the government, Max Kohler, hasn't he, to do an inspection on Liverpool City Council.
Yeah, and what he found was damning. And he found 65 anomalies of huge proportion. Each one of them is sites that would cascade to millions. So it's an awful lot of money. They estimate 100 million, I estimate way more than 200. I think I have a better understanding than they do. I understand the street. I'm from the street. I understand business. They don't truly. And I understand politics, because I had a baptism of fire with politics. So I had to learn quick, and I'm a quick learner. If you look at Joe Anderson and how he gained power, he was placed in power by people from that arena, the darkened arena. And I honestly believe he was bullied by those people when they needed to gain funds.
So he was operating out of a position of fear?
1,000,000%. So I don't overly blame Joe. I just think he didn't have a backbone.
But the thing is with Joe, he's such an unlikely candidate for a position that powerful. He doesn't look good. He's not particularly charismatic. You know, what was his skill set that enabled him to hold on to power for so long in Liverpool and be so influential?
Very simple. He was a bully.
Yeah.
So he was that bull in the china shop. He was very aggressive, and he had a very good and political antenna how to take someone out. I'm a great example of that. And I think I'm quite savvy. So he certainly pulled the rug from underneath me from a view of friendship.
Totally ruthless.
Beyond my recognition of what ruthless is. So there's a back door there that I don't understand why he would do it. And I do understand it now. I'm not naive anymore. But with Joe Anderson, and I said it before, he created or dominated the corridors of power within the Cunard, and then created labyrinths off, which were stronger corridors of power that had were aligned to gangsterism, that were aligned to fraud and corruption, and these acts were seamless in how they were put together. When he put in his corridors of power, the corridors of power were friendships aligned, not skill set provoked. So it was never about someone's skill set. It was about the friendship and the fact that if he wanted planning to go through, yes, did he manipulate behind the scenes? Of course he did. But when you look at it on a piece of paper, it's gone through council process. So there's nothing illegal gone on.
So he was able to exert his influence over council process and policy,
of course,
in order to create a paper trail that appeared to be,
of course,
correct and proper.
Of course. So I'll give you an example. Liverpool has 15,000 properties that we own as a council. We also have an enormous amount of land that we can turn into properties very easily. Let's just say you come to me, I'm Joe Anderson, you're a developer, you come to me and say, Lawrence, I've got this amazing idea, I want to turn this piece of land into 200 apartments. No problem, I'll sort that for you, because I'm connected to the planning department and I can get it all sorted. Nick Vanna's very close to me, who's head of the plan, so the council officers will sign it off, and then the politicians will then sign it off because the council officers have deemed it to be correct. So he has both ends already shown off. Officers are his, and councillors are his. And so that land gets gifted away for naught, under the proviso that in some period of time in the future, that land will give 200 lots of rates in order for the council to pay wages.
On paper, that sounds like a good thing, doesn't
Okay.
it? Yeah.
8 weeks later, it then gains planning for 200 apartments. Don't forget, we own the land and we own the planning process. Why did we give, in the city centre, each, if it's Lime Street, it's worth £25,000 per planning permission per unit. If it's somewhere on the outskirts, maybe Tyne Barn or whatever, slightly outside the city, it might be 20. So 200 apartments is worth £5 million. So that piece of wasteland that you think is wasteland is never wasteland. It's always worth something. There's no land in this world that's worth nothing. And on that basis, why have we given away so much land?
But in the
Couple it with the planning.
Yeah.
Couple it with the planning. That wasteless piece of land we're planning, that we're in control of, is worth £5 million. Why, when you come to me and you ask me, can you have that land? Don't I say to you, great, no problem. I'll give you your planning permission and I'll tidy it all up, make it all nice. It's going to be worth £5 million. I'm not going to charge you £5 million. I'm going to charge you 3.75.
To give you the incentive to take it on and all the benefits that it's going to provide for the
I'll
local
give
community.
you 75% of value, knowing full well that's the amber nectar for you to go and get funding.
Yeah.
So now you haven't got to put nothing in the middle. We get 3.75. You get your opportunity to develop, and I'll just give you a leg start. Fantastic. We don't do that. We go, here's the land for nothing. Have it. We know what it's going to be because we need the reason as to why we're giving it away. So in the documents that go to the council for it to be deemed okay, it states in there it's going to be £200. So we know it beforehand.
Yeah.
And we still give it away for naught. We've done that immeasurable times.
So there's two ways to look at this, isn't it? Either it was given away to friends, colleagues, gangsters, business people in order to develop something that wouldn't be developed normally, and those jobs are then brought into Liverpool and council tax are paid. Or it was given away to receive a backhander.
Okay. There is no land that is worth nothing, and there's no land we're planning that's worth nothing. It always has a price. So if there's a valuation for 5 and you want to let it go for 4, then fine. If you want to let it go for 5, that's also fine. What you're saying is, how do we know what it's worth? In my world, if it's got a valuation, it's worth. That's it. End
What
of
does the
story.
government say though? What's the statute? What's the law say?
So the law says that all councils must act in the best interest for the people that voted them into power and must gain best value. Always best value. Where our council have let the people down who voted them into power, factually, not up for questioning, is they have not got best value for a fact. And they have put their friendships beyond that of the people that voted them into power. That's a fact. I'll go to court. I'll
Isn't
defend
that what he's been arrested for?
No.
Okay, so...
And he's not under arrest now.
Okay. But he was arrested for...
witness intimidation.
Witness intimidation.
And possible fraud.
And possible fraud.
Look, that's gone.
Yeah.
But
the Max Kohler report hasn't gone, has it? That's still a powerful document, and it's
under investigation.
Very critical of Joe Anderson.
Okay, they're all under investigation.
Yeah.
So there are I've got to be careful what I say because I know there's going to be a court case someday, and I do not want to cause any
prejudice
issue
to the case
anywhere. I think this is where Operation Frenetic gets involved. So basically the encrypted phones.
So if there was fraud and it was done on encrypted phones, potentially it's on that case.
In order for them to extend the arrest, I believe, and I might be wrong, I believe that the judge needed justification. The justification at that time would have been the encrypted phones, evidence from that. But at the time it wasn't public knowledge and no one knew. A lot of people didn't even know of the existence of these phones. And so they chose not to tell the judge. And so they thought to themselves, as the police thought to themselves, let's not carry on with the arrests, but everyone needs to be told that they are still under investigation, which is still the case today. So there are many different issues out there, whether it be witness intimidation, whether it be fraud or corruption. There's a myriad amongst, I think there was 14 to 18 people that were arrested in total. Although when you look in the press, you think it's 4 or 5. You quoted 4 or 5 before. It's about 14.
Yeah, but even those people aren't named. It's only Joe that's named. So it looks like he's the,
they
the
were
fall
named.
guy.
no, they were named.
But not in subsequent. I've read a few recent articles. The Liam Thorpe one particularly, it only named Joe. It had 4 other individuals got arrested.
They have been named.
Yeah.
The Echo never named Derek Hatton because of their allegiance, I believe. And I think maybe slightly scared of Derek.
So was he arrested for the same charges as Joe?
I believe, look, it's only my view, I believe they were all arrested on a bullshit charge.
Yeah.
I think they were arrested on witness intimidation.
Fishing expedition.
And it was a fishing expedition.
Yeah.
I now believe that they are in a good place.
See, whether they get prosecuted or not, right, for me, doesn't take away, well, for Joe at least, and not just Joe, it's the Liverpool City Council, because it wasn't just Joe that was doing it. If you read the report, it was most of the members.
So
when it comes to
the
where they have to declare the gifts and hospitality that they've received, nobody was updating that until they knew there was an investigation done by Max Caller, and then all of a sudden they're starting to put things on the gifts register. Now, it's pretty damning that this corruption wasn't just Joe Anderson and Nick Kavanagh. It seemed to be endemic within the council itself, and the incompetence of how they were running the operation, not collecting rent, for instance. They didn't even employ a rent officer, right? So that Liverpool City Council now has 7 million quid's worth of rent uncollected. Not that I'm bothered about Liverpool City Council. I don't believe in what they're doing anyway. But it's, for me, regardless of what happens on a criminal level, regardless of whether the case comes to fruition, that report needs to be read by everyone from Liverpool, because not only does it tell you about the absolute total incompetence and fraud and corruption of Liverpool City Council, but it also tells you how it works, the mechanism behind this mayoral system, the councillors, and it's a really informative read. Not sexy, but it's informative that I think people should read.
Yeah, I think all people should read it, but just to your point, the mechanism that sat below Joe, that was put in place by Joe, in order to ensure that what he wanted to happen did happen, is still there. Where Keir Starmer's made a massive error of judgment, he should have suspended anyone that touched Joe's table, and he didn't. I do believe in the May 23 elections, the nominations will be anyone but. I think they understand how bad it has been. Don't forget, Keir Starmer was head of the CPS. The Max Caller report you talk about...
Well, he didn't do his job as head of the CPS, did he? No, there's plenty of people that he should have arrested or prosecuted, but he didn't.
I get all that.
Go on.
So, as head of the CPS, he knew about the issues in Liverpool, I would say, long before the Conservatives.
Absolutely. Yeah.
When the Max Caller report was read out in the House of Parliament, Labour Party stood up and said and thanked the Conservatives for keeping them abreast of the situation all the way through, and they agreed with the Max Caller report. So for anyone to turn around now and say that this is a partisan or political or a red or blue political issue, which Joe was saying at the time, is totally incorrect. It is Labour and Conservative together stamping out corrupt politicians, which, if you think about it, is very, very unusual. I understand. I understand that.
He must have been that bad.
I understand that people sling mud over the aisle, but when it looks like politicians in general are going to be defamed for what's gone on, I think that's when they pull cover.
Yeah.
And this time, for whatever reason, I think this is going to be the biggest case of fraud and corruption ever found in the UK.
So you think that there are more charges to come? Do you think that there is a case that's going to be heard in a court?
I think it's going to be enormous.
Okay, right. So what we've seen so far is just a trial run.
Calm before the storm.
Okay, right. There's another way of viewing this. I've heard from some people, which is that since Joe Anderson's gone, there's not one crane in the city. and that when he was here there was 30 cranes and we had all this development. I'm not sure what they were developing, because how many apartments do we actually need? But we need more. Where did he get the people? Right, but anyway, before we go on to that side thing, is that the sign of Liverpool's prosperous period was visible through the cranes in the city. Now they're gone.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on? He did what he had to do.
This is a theory.
In order to bring business into Liverpool, because isn't it all corrupt? Isn't the system itself inherently corrupt? Okay. I don't know if this is just a devil's advocate position.
So here's my view.
Yeah.
And you can pull it down if you wish. Liverpool is the centre of drugs for Europe, and has been for many years. So drug dealers don't handle money. The deepest pockets in the city are developers. There are a couple of reasons why there are 35 derelict sites in Liverpool and steel frames sticking around, piercing through the sky, that with no cranes above them. One is fund to fail. Gone to liquidation, come out at a year's time, someone else gets it and develops it out. The other one is because the wheels within the mechanism of a development normally get lubricated by drug money.
So all those cranes were money laundering?
Not all. And just going on to the politics of the city, I don't blame the developers. To your point before, I blame...
They're just trying to make a raise and get ahead and do what they've got to do as business people, haven't they?
If you lead a pig to the trough, he's going to eat. That is the way it is.
Human nature.
Human nature.
Yeah.
It's the people who are voted into power who are looking after the best interest of those people.
Well, a criminal tells you he's going to rob you, doesn't he? A politician pretends he's there to serve your interests.
And there lies the problem.
Yeah, and it's the deception. It's that's what we're up
against. Where this gets quite scary and a bit weird is some of those politicians and those friendships are from that side of the fence. And the thank yous have been in satchels of money. And I believe the police know all about that. So I think there are certain politicians who won't be just getting done for fraud and corruption. They'll be getting done for drug laundering as well.
So that opens up a whole other kettle of fish.
Well, that's where Operation Frenetic.
Yeah, so Operation Sheridan, Operation Aloft, and Operation Frenetic are all
is
linked.
The biggest of all. Yeah. There's been 1,100 arrests at least on Operation Frenetic. They reckon there's thousands more to come. And it's the first time. If a drug dealer gets caught, and he'll get caught now through his phone, it is likely, if he is a friend to a developer, that the developer will also have a phone. The drug dealer will never have anything in his name, by nature. A developer has to have everything in his name in order to gain
funding,
his leverage on his funding.
Yeah.
I think the game changer here is, it is no longer about fraud and corruption. This is all about pocket proceeds of crime.
What assets are in the public that the police can seize.
And that's what the police are going to be going after at the end of this trail.
I talked with Neil Heffy. I did a podcast with Neil Heffy 18 months ago. Yeah, good friend of mine. But he talks about pocket a little bit. And I remember him telling me that pocket proceeds of crime act, right, is that when the police recover any money from
goes locally.
50% of it goes into their pocket.
Sure.
So there's the incentive.
Locally.
Yeah.
Locally.
Yeah, but
not their pocket as in the police pocket, but into the confines of that area.
Apparently it goes into the actual police fund, or some of it.
Yeah, to be used.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So
we'll see if you're spending it.
The incentive is there for the police to go and find pocket, isn't it? And that the other half goes to central government. But your thought was like, what?
Yeah, but what's wrong with that?
Well, police seizing money and keeping it themselves.
They're not keeping it themselves, are they?
I don't know.
They're putting it into the system. Okay, well, here's my view on that then. If I hate drugs. I hate anything to do with drugs. If people want to make money out of the misery of other people, and they have assets that's been out of that misery of those people.
I'm not against taking
I
the assets.
I get that. But when that crime comes to fruition, if you like, and there is an asset there, and that money goes into the local police in order for the police to give a better service.
Should pay the police.
Yeah, maybe. But don't forget, I've had death threats through all this. And I had a 24-hour surveillance outside of this hotel because of the death threats that I got, because I was a mouthpiece against the collusion and corruption that was going on.
Do you think being as public as you are about these issues, which, it's quite ballsy what you're doing.
It's not ballsy, it's true.
Regardless of whether it's true, you're putting yourself out there and you're saying things that could create risk for yourself. Do you think being as public as you are makes it more safe for you, in a sense?
No.
No?
I'm sure JFK said the same.
Yeah.
These situations that I'm in now are there because I'm calling them out, because I feel, for the first time, strong enough over the last 2 years to state factually that I know. Can I prove it legally? No, but I'm not a detective. But do I know of conversations, and do I know of times and situations, and can I recant them? Yeah, I can. Do I think they're corrupt? Yes. Do I think that in collusion with the darkened world of gangsters and fraud and corruption? Of course I do. I have no doubt in my mind. So for me to turn around and say, this has to stop, I'm possibly putting my life at risk. Well, I know I put my life at risk because I had police outside here for 24/7 for 6 weeks for threats on both mine and my wife's life. But you come to a point where you think, this has to stop. And, people turn around to me all the time and say, but surely this happens all over the world, and surely, you understand that. And I say, but it has to stop. And I do believe Liverpool can be a catalyst for a new dawn and a new beginning.
Well, it has to be, because the Max Kohler report is pretty damning in saying that Liverpool has to turn this around. And in the end, he's quite confident that it can be done. Right? He's positive about the future. If the right people make the right moves, do the right things, that we can regain, the ground we've just conceded after spending so many years rebuilding trust, faith and confidence in Liverpool as a serious city to be, taken seriously across the world. All of a sudden, that has to be rebuilt again. Yeah, okay, so this is just a mammoth story, even though we've been going for 2.5 hours, 40 minutes. I don't even think we've scratched the surface of it. I think we could probably talk about this all night, and I'm sure we're going to talk about it again. But I think as we move towards the final part of the podcast now, is that even though we've just spent 2.5 hours talking about problems in Liverpool, problems with corruption and fraud, I like to talk about solutions. So how do we rebuild the reputation in Liverpool? What are your ideas, Lawrence, to take us to the next phase? How do we solve these immense political, economic, financial problems that we find ourselves in as a city, as a people? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know whether I'm that person to give that answer, but I'll give it my best shot as I see it. So it is clear, I think, the agenda over the next 12 months there will be arrests and charges. I think the ministers will use that as a trajectory to take control. And the reason why
government ministers take control of Liverpool.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's a must. That then brings stability to the city. Companies will want to come here then.
Stops the rot, doesn't it?
Stops the rot. It then gives us a chance to re-platform. And I would like to think that Liverpool would get angry at how they've been abused by the political system within the city. And on that basis, I do believe there is no better reason to get angry than fraud and corruption. To take food out of children's mouths, and Liverpool has 30% of our children that are born below the poverty line. To actually seize control because of that, I think gets that person off that couch that's never voted before, I think is reason enough. And I would like to think that the Labour Party either dovetails with us, or if it goes against us, I think it's going to be a very difficult task for them to win. Now, when I'm saying us, there is no us. But there needs to be new narrative. And I understand how to create narrative, and I understand how to bring in investment, and I understand how to create jobs. And I'll give you an example. I can deliver many properties in the city in a Gandhi style sort of operation, in a give back. Look, no one is getting anything out of me. That money goes straight to the bottom line. That money can be shared between the 30 wards. And if we can earn 50 million a year.
So do you mean money generated by the city of Liverpool from developments, business, enterprise?
Only developments.
Only developments. That is then rerouted to deprived wards and boroughs of Liverpool.
Yes, and also first-time buyers. So it is fair to say that Liverpool has been city-centric, centre-centric for many years under Joe's stewardship.
When you say city-centric, what do you mean? Do you mean
all the development just goes on the city centre and nothing goes out in the outreaches, and that's a fact.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, it is clear that Liverpool city centre is the driver for value. So let's just say it would cost me £40,000 to build an apartment, and let's just say I'm building a block of 500 apartments, and I can sell them for say 200k a go. That £150,000 goes straight to the 30 wards. So let's just say you're earning £50 million a year. And there's plenty of ways to make that be worth more in how you wrap it as you are a local government, and when you sell it to someone like Prudential or whoever it may be, because of the strength of the security that you give them.
So rather than relying on taxes solely, what you're saying is you generate your own.
We become our own business.
Yeah.
We never sell an asset again to a developer unless it's gone through absolute scrutiny. And even then, I don't want to do it.
And it's sold at the right value, if at all.
Because if it's worthwhile, we should gain a profit for it. Look, there's plenty of sites out here that are owned privately and can be sold. Why does the council need to sell anything? If it is good enough for the developer, it's good enough for us. It's good enough for us to make the money from it, and it's good enough for us to plough back into the communities that need it most. Things like youth centres that are closed down years ago, kids are now standing on street corners.
But why is that? Because it's not being funded.
Because it's not being funded. The funding that's there now is anchored, and it has always gone to friendships and the political and the business elite. And I'm going to throw in charities as well. They all drink from that same trough. I am hated by those people. Hated. I would never be invited to a do. I haven't been invited to a do in Liverpool in years. I wouldn't go. I don't like any of them. I don't like what they stand for.
Mate.
And I don't like the way they drink from that trough. I understand why it works. I understand how it works. What I'm saying is, imagine creating your own wealth that isn't anchored by government funding, that can be used for the most severest of declined wards. Let's go youth centres. Youth centres is something that is really important to me. I grew up in Walton Youth Centre. I was there all the time. I learned to play ping pong there. A big part of my life. Those kids now are on street corners. Imagine putting them into a youth centre, but this time you align a B&M or a Home and Bargain or a Matalan or a Signature Living. They become the conduit to that youth centre. And those kids, instead of looking at the kid in the BMW, who probably is going to go to jail now because he's getting caught on encrypted phones, or is going to get shot by his mate because he owes him money. But that's where kids are going, because they're the kids in the BMW, so they're the kids who are making it in this world. They're not, but that's how they think it is. They can then look at those kids coming through who become a chef or become an MD or starting a business or get mentored by someone like me. So the companies delve into those youth centres, they treat them as their own, they use that as their social responsibility. That's where the entrepreneurial socialism comes into it, and they use that as the conduit to bring into their business. So I could go to them and say, do you want to be a joiner? Do you want to be a spark? Do you want to be a chef? Do you want to be an MD? What do you want to be? I can give them all them jobs. And I'm a small business in comparison to a B&M, who's worth £4.5 billion. And I think those companies would jump at that opportunity, because the future is about how do these companies seamlessly give back. And I think companies will be rewarded in value based on how they seamlessly give back. I think that's the future. So it's one thing to understand business, but it's another thing to be able to allow businesses to step in. Look at what they've done to me. I stepped in thinking I was doing the right thing. I created homeless shelters that have been recreated by other cities, and yet mine took me out. They took me out because I was a political threat. Businessmen with their sharpened skill set, far superior to many, many politicians.
The problem is, though, most businessmen
wouldn't dare jump into that arena
because it's so limiting for them as a businessman. The money's no good, right?
No. They've earned the money.
Okay, that's different. So if they're towards the end of part of the career and they want to get back to the community, then yeah.
And not even the end of the career.
Yeah.
I'm saying that the future is about businesses seamlessly giving back. The world's changing. If you are now billionaire, you are hated. That's a fact. You are naturally hated. But if you are naturally giving back, and I'm not talking about writing a bleeding check. I'm talking about using your sharpened skill set to make that check go further. Using your sharpened skill set in order to make the practices of, since time immemorial with councils, 11.7 million homeless. I could probably deliver the same service for 3.
But see, I think this is largely born from your sense of identity. Right, you know who you are. You're from Liverpool. You're a Scouser. You're proud of your heritage and who you are, and you have an attraction to the city, don't you? And what the city stands for.
I only cared about the city.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So it seems to me that's one of your motivating factors is that you want to give back to this place that has created you and created me and others and stuff. I think that's what defines you as being different, because the guys from B&M ain't going to be developing Liverpool, are they? They've got no they don't call themselves Scousers, you know what I mean? But you've got a deep root here, that is giving you this inspiration to try and do something. So I'll have a lasting legacy for Lawrence Kenwright in Liverpool.
It's not about my legacy. I don't care about money. I don't care about legacy. Yeah. But some years ago, I started getting really political, and I wanted to really understand it, and I really do now. And I turned around to Kate when the Echo were talking about me running for mayor, and I said I'd love the opportunity to do that. I think I don't want the wage. I don't want anything. I want to be, and this Gandhi-like figure, I think, is how I picture it in my mind. It's not about gratification. It's not about money. It's about giving back. So Kate argued with me. Kate said, you must be mad. Why would you ever want to jump into that arena and get politically beaten up? And I said, so imagine we can almost obliterate and destroy austerity amongst children. How amazing would that be? Because we've gone out there to develop and create, give first-time buyers a leg up when they want to buy a home, do all the things that are intrinsic to people staying in the city, to make sure that community's there. If we can tie that in and make sure that austerity is gone from Liverpool, and Liverpool then becomes that pebble that people go,
are you going to deal with Liverpool's deep state? Do you think you're ruthless enough to deal with these people who are really ruthless? And if not, how would you manage to
I'll answer that
stay honest in a sea of...
Do you think I'm scared of anyone?
No.
Okay, so I've had the death threats, haven't I? So I'm not bothered about that. Do you think I'm worried about political stones? I've had all that. So what am I worried about? I've had all that. I don't care about that. This is about, I know I have a proven skill set, and I know it's a sharpened skill set.
Drain the Mersey.
And I know, Trumpian. And I know I want to seamlessly give back. And I also know that the world has to change. Why can't that change start here? And I don't think there's a better time for change because of the narrative that's going to be gifted to us when we go after the council, if it's proven to be correct, and I believe it is. I think a lot of people will be disgusted at how they've been treated.
Well, I was disgusted at that Max Caller report.
And you're an extremely intelligent guy who didn't know about that in his own city. So if you don't know and you're really informed, most people who just go about the daily work don't know about it.
Well, I'm going to put it in the show notes, so anyone that's watching, read it. Just read it. It's
non-political.
Yeah, I know.
This is done with the Labour Party and the Conservatives together as one.
And even though it's damning, the author still holds back. You can see that he's not telling you everything, but not through any kind of like lies or omission, either because the story's so big or he doesn't want to do any further damage to the city. You know,
no, they are wary of the view that they are coming laced with conservatism into a Labour-run city. But I believe we have no option. We have no option because we need to stabilise. Otherwise, we'll be hemorrhaging for years to come.
Yeah, totally.
With that legacy of, it's fraud and corruption, Liverpool's bad. No, it needs to stop. We need to stop. And if it means that we're tarnished with the Conservative brush, then so be it. But at least we're not going to have a deficit. And at least when they come into our garden, they're going to at least look after the beds of the garden. They're going to make sure that it looks well, that it comes out well, that they can turn down the end of it, and pat themselves on the back and say, look what we've done with Liverpool, it's amazing. I don't care if it's blue or red. I only care what's best for the city. And at this moment in time, if the blue want to come over and help the city in any way whatsoever, my arms are open. I don't see why any of the Scouser would say no to it, unless they are politically motivated. This is no longer about politics. This is all about what the remedy is for the city.
You're right. I mean, that totally is the way to look at it. It's not about party politics, and that's the problem in Liverpool, is people can be extremely tribal over party politics, and regardless of whether that party is beneficial to the interests of the people of Liverpool, if that party isn't representing us and isn't doing anything for us, dump them. You shouldn't have loyalty to a party, a political party. It should be, they work for us. They simply work for us. And, you know, there's an argument to be made that we shouldn't have political parties at all, because councillors, elected representatives, should be representing the constituents, not the Labour Party or the Tory Party. They represent us, and they should be carrying out our wishes, not what the chief whip tells them to do, not how the chief whip tells them how to vote. If it's against the interests of the people who elected them, there
shouldn't be a chief whip.
There needs an overhaul. The entire political system in this city and the country needs a massive overhaul. I don't know.
So how does that happen?
You're the man to do it.
No, I'm not. What I'm saying is,
I'm nominating you. Yeah, okay. Well, Lawrence, we've been 3 hours, right, and I've loved every minute of it. I'm sure we'll do it again, and maybe another 3 hours. Have you got any final words to leave us with before we wrap up this podcast?
I believe the next 6 months are going to be very tough. I think Scousers are used to going through tough terrain. But I think when we come out of it in a year's time, I think if we are strong enough, then pushing back against the political powers will be the best thing we ever do. How that looks, I don't know. All I know is there is clearly a movement that will be empowered by the negativity of what's going to happen over the next 6 months, which hopefully will get us through the gate into a new world. And if that happens, I think Liverpool can go on from strength to strength and hopefully take back that number 2 spot from Manchester.
Okay. Lawrence Kenwright, has been a pleasure. Really buzzing to chat to you. I've wanted to do it for a while, and it was great. I really enjoyed it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.